Mayor Kus, we are live.
Thank you. Call to order a regular meeting for the normal local liquor commission. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy,
Here.
Ms. Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Nord, Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Preston,
Here. First order of business is approval of the minutes of the special meeting of May 4th, 2020.
Move for approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any changes or additions? Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mayor Kus,
Aye. The minutes are approved. Item 4 is a complaint and citation on settled cases report. This has to do with 35 Years LLC doing business as Marie's Place. As you recall, there was a change of ownership on Marie's Place. The new owners wanted the license reinstated and have paid all fees, all settlements, and the previous owners no longer have any interest in this business. Could I have a motion for approval on that?
So moved.
Second.
So any discussion or questions on that? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus,
Aye. The license is approved for 35's LLC. And that's doing business at 1520 East College Avenue, Patriot Center, and 1115 Susan Drive, Suite H in Normal. We have a report, second installment of all liquor licenses. Payments were made. 8 licensees elected to pay their fee in 2 installments, and all license holders met the September 30th, 2020 deadline. There were no fees or late charges. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. We are adjourned. We'll see you back here in about 7 minutes. a meeting for the Normal Town Council for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus,
Here?
Mr. McCarthy,
Here.
Ms. Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The governor has issued a disaster declaration related to public health concerns caused by the statewide COVID-19 pandemic. As mayor, I've determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the risk of exposure to COVID-19 virus stemming from an indoor gathering, and that the remote meeting is the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the council staff and the general public. We have 3 speakers tonight in public comment. I would remind the speakers to state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to make comment. Our first speaker would be Tim Ryan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Ryan, and I am here tonight to just express our support for our project that we are proposing before the council. We are proposing to acquire and rehabilitate what is known as the Fairview Building on North Main Street into senior apartments, affordable senior apartments. It'll be 41 units. Along with the rehab of the current building, we plan to build a new addition onto that building, which will house the bulk of the units. With the existing structure will house some units, but mostly tenant services. It's our plan to restore that structure to its historic, to how it used to look, bring it all up to code, but also leave all historic features to it intact through the use of federal historic tax credits. So I just wanted to give a brief overview on our project, and that is all I have to say.
Thank you. Our second speaker tonight is Matt Wilcox.
Hello, my name is Reverend Matthew Wilcox. I'm the senior pastor at First Presbyterian Church of Normal, and I'm here to speak in support of a project that we've put forward for proposal to install a ground-mounted solar array within our church property. This is an exciting project for us as a church as we look to continue to be great stewards of God's creation, of which we are a part. Thankful for the opportunity we have in ways that will support our church, allowing us to free up more funds to support several of our local mission partners within the Bloomington Normal area. Also thankful that it falls in line with what we've seen to be positive trending initiatives within our own town of Normal to create green and environmentally friendly opportunities for us as a community. And then finally, just a word of thanks for all of the hard work for the folks within the town of Normal. They've been able to be very helpful for us to facilitate this project in a way that is beneficial, that's positive, but also a way that connects us more deeply with our surrounding neighbors in our nearby subdivisions. And I've been very grateful for those conversations and for all of the help from those within the town of Normal. So again, just wanted to voice my support for this project and hope that it is received well. Thank you.
Thank you. And our third speaker is Carl Sela.
Hi, I'm Carl Sela, and I'm a normal guy. The circumstances of the withdrawal of Serban are troubling. My biggest initial concern was that the Serban employees were already vested and the refund would amount to them double dipping because they would still get full pension benefits regardless. However, doing some research, I found they are not vested, so the proposed refund is not completely inappropriate. A lot of negatives in that last sentence, so the short version is they are not double dipping. However, Serban's contract requires them to to give 6 months notice before termination. Did they provide the 6 months notice, but the town staff chose not to inform the council, chose not to publicize looking for replacement service, and chose not to prepare for the end of this contract? And if finding a replacement is such a non-issue, why were we providing this or using their service in the first place? Much less lying to IMRF and our insurance administrators about them being municipal employees. If they did not provide proper notice, then why is the town rushing to dispense this money versus waiting for that 6 month period? Granted, 6 months interest on the amount in question is only a few $100s, but especially in these times, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a local business or individual who would say they would rather have nothing than a few $100s. I'm not saying we shouldn't do the refund because it looks like it is appropriate. I'm just saying this issue should be tabled. There should be an audit to make sure that the amount is proper because this whole arrangement has been hinky from the beginning. This should be delayed. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Before we get into the omnibus agenda, Ms. Reese, you had a clarification on something in the packet.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just want to make one clarification for council. Packet item E, which pertains to acquisition of computers from Dell. I just wanted to point out that the resolution has a typographical error. The quote is accurate. The resolution actually indicates that the quote totals $54,949.22. It actually should be $59,949.22. So I just wanted council to know of that typographical error. And in the resolution, the report is accurate, the quote is accurate. We just have that typo.
Thank you. So we move to the omnibus agenda, items considered routine in nature and will be handled by one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And seeing no hands raised.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, my hand's
Oh,
up.
I'm sorry. Well, you weren't using the hand raise, and that's what I watch. So
It's in the application.
I'm sorry?
Does it not show in the
Oh, you know
application?
what? I'm sorry, Mr. Nord. It just now popped up for the both of you. There's a change.
Okay.
Zoom here. It now shows in the participants bar and your hand in your picture frame. This is something new, but it took a minute to populate. So Ms. Smith?
I would like to remove item F.
Thank you. And Mr. Nord?
I'd like to remove item C and E.
Motion for approval from Mr. McCarthy. Do we have a second?
So second,
Thank you. Items considered under omnibus or approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 4th, 2021. A report to receive and file town of Normal expenditures for payment as of January 13th, 2021. And a resolution considering the release of executive session minutes from June 19th, 2017, February 18th, 2019, and April 15th, 2019. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The omnibus items are approved. Item C is a motion rebating funds to Central Illinois Regional Broadband Network, better known as CERBN. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second,
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Ms. Reese, would you just verify that what Mr. Seal has said is accurate, that the folks are not vested and this isn't a chance where they're going to be double dipping?
Sure.
I'm
Sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I certainly will. I'm not sure I understood all of Mr. Seela's comments because there was a little bit, I couldn't hear him well in my earpiece, but I can't speak for what employees of Serban are vested and which ones aren't. There were 3 of them. I believe at least 2 are not vested. But certainly there is no double dipping, so to speak. Serban's plan is they left the town's employment as indicated in the report effective December 31st. They have found other solutions for their benefit package, including their retirement program. So we are just rebating. We're asking council to authorize the rebate back to them.
So are any Serban employees remaining in IMRF, that have vested?
Mr. Nord, as indicated, I'm not sure if any of the 3 are vested. There is 1 employee who has worked for Serban, but was in a state retirement program prior to working for Serban. So I don't know the current status of that employee in terms of which pension program they're covered by.
Okay. I assume that before the funds are released, there'll be some check with IMRF to make sure that if they're taking their money, or that if we're going to be paying them their retirement money that we paid to IMRF, that they have removed themselves from IMRF. I'm sure there's some paperwork to show that. That'll happen before we refund money. Is that accurate?
They have been terminated as town employees. That is accurate.
Okay, but any of the monies, I mean, we are refunding money that we paid IMRF. So IMRF has that money,
Correct.
right? Okay, so their pension is between IMRF and the employee. The town's not involved anymore. We're gonna give them money back. How do we ensure that they're then not going to still be under the IMRF pension if we're giving the money back to them?
Well, we are rebating to Serban the amount that that entity has paid us to put into IMRF. That amount is staying in the IMRF pot.
And will that be allocated to those employees?
If they choose to take a withdrawal, their share comes back to them and they would then roll it into their new pension program.
IMRF is going to refund their share back to them, and the town's refunding?
Well, Mr. Nord, IMRF is funded 4.5% by the employee and the balance by the employer. The employee's contribution, if they're not vested, they have an opportunity to pull out their money and reinvest it somewhere else. Any employee has that opportunity.
Okay, I mean, I'm not quite understanding. As long as if this gets audited at some point, they are not double dipping, so to say. And I'll just trust that we're on the same page, that whoever's auditing this knows what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Another question then, in this audit, the original report from 2013, when this was set up, it said that that Serban will pay for fringe benefits as well, and that if their employment is terminated for any reason, that Serban will agree to equitably adjust the payment to the town to reflect payment during the employee's employment. So during our council meetings, the council has been informed by HR that some of the fringe benefits had not been reimbursed by Serban. So I just want to make sure that we have on record that when this audit is done, that someone looks at those fringe benefits to make sure that taxpayers are made whole and that it's in accordance with the original contract. And if we end up, well, so the request tonight is to authorize payment, but we've not seen an audit been completed, so council hasn't been able to review an audit. If we overpay, who's accountable for collecting the difference?
I don't know, Mr. Nord. I suppose we would work that out with Serban.
Okay. How long ago did we find out that they were going to want to get out of this agreement?
Early last fall, perhaps.
Okay,
I don't recall
Yeah.
an exact date. I would have to dig into that.
okay. Yeah, the council, or at least I was not made aware until just last week at our, well, possibly last week or well, recently. But I would like to move that we table this refund because we've got 6 months until an audit has been completed. So that way the council can look and say, yes, we agree to pay this dollar amount. Otherwise, we're just giving you an up to number to pay. And at the end of the day, the council are the ones that are accountable for fiscal responsibility within the town.
We have, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second.
All right, then I do have one question. Ms. Rees, how long until the audit will be complete?
I don't know. I haven't asked for a particular special audit in terms of the town's funds. Our audits occur in the summer.
Well, the calculation, I think, is how you refer to it in the
Okay.
write-up.
All right, a calculation should be done within the next, probably 3 weeks, I believe.
Okay, then I'd just like to request that that calculation be shared with the council prior to that payment being sent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further on this item? Please call the roll. And Mr. Nord, would you lower your hand?
Yes, thank you.
Mayor,
Mr. Mayor, I think Ms. Smith had questions.
yes, I just wanted to clarify some things that in previous council meetings, we have continuously been assured by staff that Serban has reimbursed the town for the benefits that they paid. There has been some question from Mr. Nord about when they use the healthcare policy, and since we're self-funded, whether or not their claims might have exceeded the premiums, but HIPAA prevents us from, and the policy of insurance as a concept prevents us from obligating any employee from compensating us when their use of the insurance exceeds the premium that they paid. But I have heard continuously that the billing to Serban for any benefits advanced to them by the town was ongoing. And that this, what we're looking at tonight, is a calculation to reimburse employees for their contributions to a defined benefit program that they are no longer participating in, giving them the opportunity to divert those dollars to a defined contribution plan that their company may pursue at a future date. So I just wanted to put that on the record. The calculations were done by accountants, CPAs on the staff who looked at the contributions that went in, calculated a rate of return on those contributions, and then arrived at the figure that we have here. And this is intended to be the final amount. If we asked the auditors to review this, I trust that this is something that the auditors could undertake as part of their regular audit. I see no need to isolate them and incur an additional expense of an audit at this time before they're on board to pursue their regular audit.
Thank you. I'm not sure, I apologize to council. I'm not sure if we're having a technical problem, but it appears that there may be a lag in raising your hand. So if you'd just give me a little nod too, if you want to do that. I'm going to try and figure this out because there does appear to be a new protocol going on here. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, you are accurate with the reference to the healthcare. But what I was referring to with the fringe benefits, there's some employee assistance programs that we had paid lump sum for. And those were ones that HR had mentioned were not a part of the reimbursement. So, as long as we look at all what is considered fringe benefits, and that was my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to refocus the conversation to the proposal that's on hand, the rebidding funds related to IMRF. Just a few questions, I think, for clarification. So as I understand it, I suppose this is for you, Ms. Reese. We're simply returning to Serban contributions to IMRF back to Serban because their employees are no longer part of IMRF. Is that accurate?
Correct.
The concerns about double dipping and the like, I think, are easily answered, and had the opportunity to talk to the Serban director in the interim time between the packet coming out and the meeting, and he shared with me that nobody was vested in IMRF, so none of that is actually a concern at all. So I just wanted to make sure that we got that out there. Another question I have is, do I understand it correctly that the town did not contribute any funds to IMRF on behalf of Serban employees?
Well, Mr. McCarthy, the town, every payroll, the town contributes the employer's responsibility into IMRF, police pension, fire pension, all of our pension obligations. Serban then reimbursed the town. So, technically, to answer your question, the town did, but was reimbursed. Now we're looking to rebate that back.
So every single month, Serban wrote you a check.
Correct.
So all the contributions, although fronted by the town, were reimbursed by Serban.
Correct.
So this has cost the town nothing. So we're simply returning to Serban money that they paid into IMRF. That's all we're doing tonight. Is that?
Correct. That's accurate.
Just want to make sure. Great. I just want to make sure that these facts are out there on a record tonight. I know there's some rumors and conversations going out there that are unfounded, but I agree that these funds are due to Serban, and that we should return them to Serban to make their employees whole, the money that they paid into IMRF. So I'm supportive. Thanks.
And Ms. Cummings?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to belabor this, but I also think, and I was hoping Mr. McCarthy was going to also capture this because he was on that road. One thing people need to know is, because even though we're rebating Serban this money, it's not coming out of the IMRF pot, but our town actually benefits for that money staying in the pot, and how it benefits our current employees by staying there. So there is no loss to us by rebating them what's due to them. Another thing to clarify, which was glossed over, is the fact that there is a portion that an employee pays, and what they do with their portion that is still in IMRF is their prerogative. And so we do have to be careful on painting these the way we want to paint the picture about what's happening tonight. At the end of the day, the reality is Serban reimbursed the town for monies to go into a retirement system, since they are no longer going to be a part of that and they need to identify one separate of us. They will need those funds to be able to begin a retirement system for their employees. So there's no funny business. And I don't think, that I agree with Ms. Smith about having to do an additional audit. I believe that we have capable CPAs who know what they're doing, who can calculate effectively and efficiently what should be paid back to Serban. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus,
Aye, the motion is approved. Item E is a resolution to waive the formal bidding process and accept quotes totaling $59,949.22 from Dell for the purchase of computer equipment. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second,
Thank you. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Ms. Reese, considering the upcoming revenue problems that the town's going to be facing and then the difficulty in just receiving imports from overseas right now, was there discussion of possibly extending this program out a little bit, maybe 6 months or a year, to try and recoup a little bit of savings?
Mr. Nord, I do want to point out that I do have Ms. Gadaraju on the line, so she'll answer specific questions about this action item. In regard to your question, no, we did not talk about delaying this in detail, but I do want to let council know that we certainly have tracked the risk. I believe a year ago you asked whether or not the town should replace our equipment so frequently, and asked us to reconsider our practice of replacing when the warranty expires. And so we've been tracking things like that in terms of the amount of attention our equipment needs. We do believe it is valuable to replace our equipment, as Ms. Gadaraju pointed out in her council report. So in response to your question, no, we did not consider a delay in acquiring or replacing our equipment this year.
I just want to add just something to that, Ms. Reese. So we will technically be several months delayed from the warranty time, Mr. Nod, because the estimated delivery date on some of these equipment is not until April, and most of this equipment is already expired. They already have expired warranties.
Has Dell indicated that there was an increase in cost because of COVID-related issues or a delay in getting equipment?
Yes, definitely there is delay in getting equipment, but they have not indicated any increase in cost.
And how much more is this than what it was 6 months ago? And is it the same number of machines? Is it comparable?
No, number of machines not, but costs are pretty comparable, yes.
Okay. I'm going to say this probably every year that this comes up. If we could always evaluate to see if we can extend the life a little bit more. And I understand that there's a warranty, but I also understand that there's warranty options where we can pay to have it extended further. So as long as we do the calculation, I'm going to ask every time this comes up. So thank you.
Ms. Smith?
I was just going to highlight that in my contacts with staff, it was pointed out that the cycle is intended to scatter the replacement so that no single department has the same age equipment and might be subjected to implementing all new hardware and software simultaneously and run into complications when that equipment begins to run down. So it is my sense that the staff has plotted out a replacement schedule to meet the needs of when equipment is needed, put it into the departments in such a way that the departments are not reliant on the same age equipment over time, and that these prices do include a warranty that is quite heavily used by staff. I think I was quoted 1 to 2 times a month the calls are made. So I really commend the staff for their ability to manage what is a complicated technical issue. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I'm switching buttons to raise and lower hands. It is a change. I just wanted to echo a little bit of what Ms. Smith said, but not to kick and belabor the point much. But I greatly appreciate the leadership on this item, frankly. I appreciate the staff working to streamline our operations, ensure minimal work interruptions, and that our equipment is recycled and returned so it doesn't become a deficit and a problem in our operations, and that people can just concentrate on doing their jobs and not worrying whether or not their equipment's going to work to allow them to do it. Just as a small business owner who routinely buys equipment, I also want to say good job on the pricing. It looks pretty good to what I've been able to acquire in the marketplace. Pricing looks pretty good. Thanks, and I'm supportive.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Resolution is approved. Item F is an amended resolution to appropriate $930,000 of motor fuel tax funds for the Towanda Avenue Bridge over Sugar Creek repair project. Ms. Smith.
I move this item.
Second.
Ms. Smith.
I just wanted to have the record reflect that this amended resolution is now for the revised total of this project, incorporating some of the change orders that have been identified as the inspections and planning took place to recognize that there were some complications from the original expectations for this bridge project. And it is not, this amount is not in addition to what we previously approved. I wanted to be sure that that is clear on the record. That's all I had, and I am supportive of this.
Thank you. Mr. Norton.
Thank you. Has this changed a little bit where now we're able to get grant funding to help with this project? Is that different than what we approved last time?
Mr. Nord, I'm going to ask Mr. Otto to turn his camera on and join the conversation, and he'll be able to answer detailed questions about the project.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. The funding for the project is essentially motor fuel tax. The grant program that's referred to in the memo is a Rebuild Illinois grant that was instituted back in July of 2020. These are funds that the state provides into our motor fuel tax account. So for each of the next three, for last fiscal year and the next 2 fiscal years after that, we'll get approximately $1.3 million. So essentially it's a supplement to the motor fuel tax payments we get each month. So the only change that we have to do is we have to designate where those funds go. So as part of this resolution, we designate this project as eligible for those funds, but essentially the funding and the source is motor fuel tax.
But is that additional state funding, is that new money that we didn't know we had previously?
It was new in July of 2020. I think we've discussed it previously with the Gregory Street Culvert project as well as the West College Avenue project. So no, we've known about this for some time.
Okay. Do you have an estimate as to, well, with this project, it's now almost 2.5 times more than what was originally estimated. And I understand by reading it, there were some unknowns that were discovered and caused that. But over the past year, this isn't really just speaking to you, Mr. Otto, but to the entire budget across the entire town. We've had some projects that have been off by a significant margin, and being off by that amount makes me think that in this upcoming budget session, we should just reflect back on that and maybe build some additional margin somehow. I'm not saying where, to account for deviations like this, because at some point we may not have the funds and we've got to do something different. And it's significant to be off 2.5 times versus, just 30%. But thank you.
Appreciate that comment, Mr. Nord. Certainly, we try to have reasonable estimates when it comes to our projects. When we actually get into design, sometimes those estimates take a turn. But I think that your comments help cement what we tried to do in terms of a fund balance. We always try to maintain a significant fund balance in motor fuel tax and the general fund and the capital fund and all of our various funds to make sure that we are flexible enough to able to get these projects done. So I appreciate your comments.
Is there a project that's being pushed off that we were planning on doing now that the additional 550,000 is going to be used out of that motor fuel tax fund?
Thank you, Mr. Nord. No, there's not. We still plan on implementing the projects we had. This would come from fund balance. As Ms. Reese said, we try to plan appropriately so that we can react and take advantage of, in this case, we're taking advantage of having the road closed to do some additional work on either side of the bridge. So that's just an opportunity to be cost effective with some pavement maintenance, as well as we found some deterioration in the south piers of the bridge. So that's also being proactive to address that before it becomes a bigger issue and affects the life of the bridge essentially.
But the 550 wasn't kind of earmarked or accounted for a project for next year or the year after?
It was not. We have fund balance in the motor fuel tax to cover the cost.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Nord, would you lower your hand? And
sorry.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the amended resolution is approved. Concludes our omnibus tonight. We have two items of general orders, the first of which is a resolution conditionally approving an amended site plan for 901 to 905 in North Main Street having to do with senior housing.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion on this item.
Mayor Kus, could I jump in before council starts talking? So sorry about taking over your conversation, but Mayor, I did ask Ms. Davison to be prepared to talk about the project if you're interested in an overview, because Mr. Ryan spoke during public comment, but Ms. Davison is going to give some highlights in terms of the actual project, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Thank you very much, everyone. So this is a project that's pretty exciting coming before us. It's an opportunity to add 41 units of affordable housing for seniors, which is actually designated as 55 plus. So that's quite a bunch of people. This would be happening at the county's property up in the 900 block of North Main, which you probably know as being the property directly north of Fairview Park. It's where the juvenile detention facility is, the nursing home, and what was formerly the historic sanatorium building. The proposal, as Tim Ryan had mentioned in the beginning, is to restore the sanatorium building and convert that to residential units and then build an adjacent second structure that would complement the architecture of the sanatorium and add another 25 units. So in total, it's 41 units. It's a great location for affordable housing. It's adjacent to transit, which with a very active line. It's adjacent to the park and the trail, lots of amenities in the area. The only variance they're asking for is parking, which the county is fine with, and the county owns all the rest of the parking around it. They're asking for 34 spaces instead of 66, but based on their experience with similar other developments, they feel this is completely reasonable and will work out quite well for the residents, many of whom they don't expect will have their own vehicle. So this certainly helps the town accomplish some of our goals in providing affordable housing. Particularly excited that the units will all be built to have visitable design features, which makes it easier for people with mobility restrictions to visit the units. They're all, and I don't want to get in the weeds on the building code, but they're also designed to be easily converted to fully accessible. So it's a really nice feature and we're excited to support it.
Thank you. Ms. Cummings.
I just want to share that I'm excited about this, and just to say, Mercy, I'm going to try to get us all off the regular use of saying affordable housing to more equitably diverse housing. because it also includes the fact that we have a facility for our more senior and seasoned residents. So I'm always excited to see that. I look forward to us continuing to move in that way to make sure that we are accessing equitable housing for all facets of our community. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Put my hand down. So is this property going to be, or is this is there going to be a parcel that's carved out of the middle of this that's getting its own tax ID number? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, the way we understand it, the Illinois Housing Development Authority would prefer that it be subdivided. I believe it's a long-term lease between the LHDC, which is the developer, and the county. And so from our perspective, that would typically trigger a subdivision. So I guess the short answer is yes, we expect this to be subdivided. As I noted in the report, they didn't want to invest in all of the engineering required for that at this time, because they don't know for sure if they're going to get the tax credits they need from the state. So that decision will be made in the next few weeks at the state level. And if all goes well, they'll be back with a subdivision.
And they'll have to have some sort of access to Main Street for this parcel to be carved out, just like other pieces.
Yeah, most likely this is going to come back with a final plat that shows access easements. So as I noted in the report, it's very likely that the final plat approval will require a couple of variances as well that we are, because we're working with the county on this, will be comfortable supporting. But there will certainly be an access easement so that the county can continue using the site exactly as they use it now.
Yeah, I understand the easements, just as long as this parcel has some sort of connectivity to a road, so we don't build a parcel that's got no access from the outside. If in 20 years or whenever this lease expires, they want to sell it to someone else and they've got no access to get to their property. You know, that's the kind of thought. Have there been any discussions about fee discounts, waivers, or other incentives that are coming from the town?
No, as part of the site plan, the fees aren't really at issue yet, but the developer is aware of what's coming down the line. So at this point, they're aware of the fees.
And and we haven't offered to give any incentives at this point, and none have been asked?
No, I mean, there's nothing on the table. It wouldn't be appropriate as part of the site plan anyway.
Okay. Now, we've got other retirement homes in the community. This new one that we're building, or that's being proposed, will this one be a tax generating parcel? Is that what it will convert into?
I am not positive about the taxing status of this. I can say that this is an independent living. This is not a nursing home. It's not supported living. There aren't nursing staff living on site or anything like that. So it's merely multifamily, but for 55 and older.
Sure,
but I don't know about the tax status.
A business owns it. Will this be for profit, or the where the town's going to be receiving tax property taxes for this, or is this going to be a non-for-profit where there's no taxes applied?
Well, it's a long-term lease. Ms. Davison indicated that it's a long-term lease. If the developer gets the tax credits and they can move forward with the project, it would be a long-term lease with the county. I don't know if the developers, if the ownership of the organization is tax exempt or not. So I can't respond to that. Mr. Day perhaps knows the answer. I would suspect that if it's not a tax exempt owner of the business, then supposedly the long-term lease would generate it as a taxable property. But Mr. Day, can you respond?
I would ask that we hold that because it really doesn't have anything to do with the amended site plan. And that gives staff time to look into this. This will come before us again so we can get that question answered between now and then. I don't think we need to get that level of detail tonight.
Sure. Then there's other developments where the town sewer crossing other parcels has happened in town. And in the past, town staff has discouraged supporting easements for sewer. to accommodate other economic development projects. So what criteria was met for this for staff to anticipate supporting and recommending a variance?
This is a fairly unique project for us in that it is something the county is working on with this developer, and it's meeting a goal that we're frankly unable to meet on our own, where the town is not able to provide affordable housing. So when a developer like this comes along with such a unique proposal and it involves another government partner, we're much more comfortable supporting this kind of utilities crossing property lines, because we anticipate the county will continue to be the owner of this property for potentially ever. And so it's something that we think is a reasonable amount of flexibility with the code. But you're right, it's not something we typically support.
Okay, then in the write-up, it says that having Connect Transit close by is something that they really valued. Well, are they, I guess the developer's listening, so I guess I should just ask him directly. Are you aware that Connect Transit does not enter the property and that your residents will have to walk from the building to the street? And in other retirement
Mr. Nord,
centers, that's been a problem.
Again, Mr. Nord, this gets away from our site plan. There's plenty of time to answer those questions. We don't have to get into that tonight.
Okay, then has Connect Transit been brought on board, because they've requested in the past that they be brought in early into developments like this where it's going to be a transit dependent development? Have they been included in the conversation?
Well, I can say that this came up at the public hearing, and there are already Connect Mobility vehicles that come in and out of the site depending on the need of different users. So I guess like anywhere in town, if someone who lives at this site has that specific need, they would be able to avail themselves of that service, whereas others who are using general Connect services would be expected to walk up the sidewalk, which will be built, which is a nice feature of this, up to Main Street. So I mean, this is 55 plus, and for many people, this is not a distance that would be, couldn't be overcome. So the mobility service though would be there for people who are eligible for that service. And they already enter the site for that.
Sure, but the mobility service is very different, and you've got to be disabled proven to go that far. And now that we've got new leadership with Connect, or leadership has changed,
Mr. Nord,
I'd like that conversation to be had again. Because
Mr. Nord, I'm going to overrule you on this. We're here to talk about an amended site plan. Again, there will be plenty of opportunity to talk about these issues, but tonight's not the appropriate time to have that discussion.
well, I think it's appropriate for the developer to know early on. So that's why I'm bringing it up while he's on the call.
I think the developer is probably well aware of the issues he has to deal with going forward. He's probably done many of these projects. Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to just be quick here and say that I think this is overall, I think this is a great project that meets a need that we have had in this community for some time. And so I would like to commend Mr. Ryan and the LHDC for pursuing this and going through this for the last year. And I think this will certainly fit a need in our community and be a great asset for a group of citizens who may not have a whole lot of choices or quality choices in housing like this this could provide. Just one note, while I don't know the answer to the question and don't want to rehash the entire thing again, I will point out to all my colleagues that in our council packet, the report does mention that the LHDC is a nonprofit affordable housing developer, for what that's worth. But otherwise, I mean, I think it's great. I'm certainly in support of our action here tonight. Thanks.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, Mr. Preston just caught one of the things I was going to share, that our packet does indeed list them as a nonprofit. Whether that answers the questions, I don't know. Also, I just want to lend my support. Personally, I think this is a great project. You know, first, as an infill project, we're not developing ag land into commercial use, which is always positive for me. So we're taking an old, unproductive, unused asset and we're going to rehabilitate an old asset and make it productive again, and then we're going to add to it. And as my colleague, several of my colleagues have mentioned, you know, these are sorely needed retirement living centers and facilities in our community. All you have to do is talk to the realtors, and maybe Mr. Preston being involved in this, just she can share, but we are way underserved in that market. So thanks to Mr. Ryan and his group for bringing this project, and I'm supportive, and good luck.
And Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess the last to go here, and so I'm going to just repeat, but I think it's worth repeating the number of good boxes that this project checks. Infill has been mentioned, diversifying in housing stock has been mentioned. And I know that the Laborers Housing Development Corp has been looking for a project like this for a while. And so I'm really glad to see that this has come together, and it has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to echo in on this too, because I think it's an exciting project. Thank you to Lyuna and the developer for moving on this project. It takes a significant building in our community, historic building, and puts it through an interesting adaptive reuse. And I know it's something that the county and the town have been concerned about for years. It's a final building. What are we going to do with it? And it seems like we have a solution that is eye-appealing and economically sound, and as everyone has said, fills a need in our community. So kudos to you for moving forward on this project, and we look forward to it coming out of the ground. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the resolution is approved. Item 8 is a resolution conditionally approving another amended site plan, and this is for 2000 East College, the First Presbyterian Solar Array.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Ms. Reese, do we have any background before we jump in?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Like the previous agenda item, I asked Ms. Davison to provide council a summary on this project as well. This pertains to a proposed solar array at First Presbyterian Church. One of your public commenters tonight spoke on regarding this issue. So Ms. Davison is going to give you the summary.
Sure, thanks, Ms. Reese. So as it's stated in your report, First Presbyterian would like to add ground-mounted solar panels to the northwest portion of their property. If you've ever visited the site, you know they have a very large green space north of their church facility and parking lot. And this particular area is proposed for that northwest corner. The area would be occupied, would be about 185 feet by 117 feet. Along the north side of their property, there's an existing berm that's a few feet high and a row of fairly mature evergreen trees that are not full maturity, but they're between 10 and 15 feet tall. The proposal is to add the same number of evergreens along the north side in a staggered position so that they'll fill in the gaps, and that they would grow pretty quickly to make a fairly solid screen. The solar panels themselves would be angled towards the south. The original proposal was to be 9 feet tall, and I should say to screen from the east as well, where there are residential houses across the street on Hershey. They would be adding a similar number of evergreens over there. So it would be screened on both sides that are adjacent to residential. There would be no new overhead power lines. Everything would be undergrounded. They're proposing a pollinator planting under the panels, which actually the church already has some pollinator plantings in some of their landscape beds, which I mean, typically means prairie plants that are flowers and ornamental grasses, that sort of thing. During the course of the hearing, there were some concerned neighbors that testified, and following some discussion, the church was able to lower the height of the panels from 9 feet to 6.5 feet, which will make them far less visible even still. So that was I'll say a compromise. It was a new position, which was pretty exciting. And that will still work really well. We currently don't have zoning code standards that address ground mounted solar panels, although you can see solar panels on roofs all over town. We did look into other codes that are out there, and for the most part, municipalities just require that they be screened, and typically that they be in a backyard or a side yard, not in the front yard. So even though we don't have code provisions addressing this, what's being proposed would comply with most codes that you would find out there, unless you found a community that just banned them altogether. So we're really comfortable with it. We supported the original proposal. I think the shorter panels, though, helps address some concerns. So we are very much in support of this, as we noted in the report.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll. Mr. Nord, I'm sorry.
Sorry, there must be quite a bit of delay, huh?
Seems like.
Yeah. A couple questions. From looking at the map, it looks like that the solar array is not going to be screened at all from traffic on the two main arteries right there. Are there any safety issues, or did you look at any safety issues for glint or glare created during certain times of the day?
So I'm not sure exactly what you mean. They will be screened from Hershey with a row of evergreens that'll be staggered and completely blocking the solar panels. As far as college goes, they're way behind the building itself, so I don't know that there would be any issue with that. The materials that they use for these ground-mounted panels are low glare to no glare, so they shouldn't be like shiny beacons or anything. So no, that's not something we're concerned about.
Okay, on the drawings that were provided, the trees are not along Hershey. They're more towards the west.
Well, there's an existing row of evergreens along the west property line between this and the buffet. But no, I think the drawings, they do or should show the same number of evergreens along Hershey, along the portion where the solar panels will be. So
I think that's true, Ms. Davison. I'll jump in and say, I think on council packet page 8-12 and page 8-16, it shows a line of some evergreens there along Hershey Road.
Okay. Yeah, because I did a little bit of research and saw that in Colorado, they had issue and concern with glint and glare when they put solar panels next to main roads, and at certain times of the day that could happen. And as long as you've looked into it, that I'm comfortable that there's no safety issue. What about inverter noise?
From everything I've read, it's really not an issue. I think that when you get into these really large scale commercial installations that are basic, like that you can buy into, that are out in the county, that are, I mean, far larger than this, they'll be acres in size. I think then you might start to run into some humming and some noise. But at this particular scale, from what I've read, it's not an issue. Now, I will say that there's one of the installers is available if you wanted to ask a technical question like that. But from what I've read, the noise isn't an issue.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely love to hear from the installer on both these issues, the glint and the noise issue.
Mayor, we do have the install. There she is, Yvonne.
Hello, my name is Yvonne Long. I'm with Hakatolo. And regarding the sound of the inverters, and we don't anticipate any noticeable sound at all from the public area to even be a concern. And with glint and glare, we also have anti-glare panels, and they are south facing towards the church itself. And so they would not be seen from the Hershey or from the field side.
Okay, then according to the church's website, this is an array that you guys are paying for and putting in place. So if there's an issue, I assume you guys will be the ones taking care of that and rectifying it. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Then back to the town staff. Thank you. I appreciate it. Then back to the town staff. Have we now, the write-up says this is going to be the first one in our community, so we don't have any history with this. What type of research did you do with other municipalities that have put a sizable solar array near residential homes? And what were the
I put
pros and
out
cons?
Sure. I put out an email to the planners listserv across the state, and I had several planners send me what they have in their codes, and they're all remarkably similar because they're all based off of a model ordinance. So the issue with these sorts of solar panel installations is really just the aesthetics. And for most communities, they do have a difference between this size of an installation and a truly large scale commercial installation that you typically wouldn't find right in the middle of town, primarily because there wouldn't be enough room. But for this kind of smaller installation, it's really about the screening and being in a rear yard or a side yard, generally with some small setback off the property lines. So.
If that's the case, why is it not done in other places more? I mean,
the ground mounted solar panels?
Yeah.
Like why aren't they installed more?
Why aren't they installed in a residential area?
I'm not an expert in the industry, but the way I understand it is there are just a lot more incentives that are popping up all the time. And so there are financial reasons to do it now that didn't exist before. And I also think that there are many institutions like churches, I know of several, that it is part of their mission for environmental stewardship reasons to pursue this. So maybe it's just that those factors are coming together. And I think it's not a surprise that we're getting a request at this point. But the cost has to be part of it.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with these and the bigger projects. In Champaign-Urbana, they've got a couple big solar farms that are going on there. Not quite as close to residents, but I know you can sign up for being a part of a big solar farm that's outside of a rural area, get the same benefits. This one, according to the write-up, I don't know if it was your write-up or the church's write-up, this is no cost to them, which is similar to other ones. And the company gets to receive the benefits for it. Do you have any reservation with us kind of blazing forward on this being the first one? I mean, is there any reservation that you have that the council should be aware of or concerned about?
I don't. I mean, having looked around at other ordinances, I think what we're doing really falls into line with most of them. You will find some communities that are just opposed to this 100%, and they just make it all but impossible to install them. So that's certainly, there are some municipalities that do that, but it seems that most are taking this approach of reasonable setbacks, rear yards, height restrictions that are quite a bit higher than 6.5 feet, I'll say. But they do make a distinction between installations that are solely serving that property versus selling the power to the grid. I mean, again, you run into the distinction between large scale commercial installations versus, something that's just supporting one property.
I will also jump in and indicate that the Planning Commission gave this thorough consideration at their most recent meeting and did support this project and unanimously in terms of recommending to council that you approve it. But I think part of it was their comfort level in what the church was doing to try to minimize the risk of impact on the neighbors, and also certainly we respect the church's conversation with their neighbors and trying to modify their plans to address the neighbors' concerns.
And then one last question. By putting this solar installation on there and with the relationship, how this is being financed and ownership model, does this then revert to a taxable parcel in the town, or is this going to remain non-taxable?
Well, this installation is just for their own personal use to address their own expenses and utility costs. So this does not impact the taxability or the tax exempt status of the church, I would imagine. Again, Mr. Day can address that, but certainly we don't have an impact on that. That's between the church and township assessors and county assessors. So,
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Smith.
I just wanted to add for the record that in my contacting staff for some clarification on this, I was told that the existing trees, the evergreens that are in place, have heights currently of 10 to 15 feet, which would do more than block the view of a 6.5 foot tall panel. And the proposed solution of interspersing new trees in the gaps, those new plantings are proposed to be at 6 feet tall trees and not the saplings that you get for free on Arbor Day. And so that this, with the growth of these evergreens that do tend to be more rapid growing than a deciduous tree, and that they reach a height at maturity of 20 to 25 feet in a matter of time, it should be a moot point about blocking the view. And I strongly support this effort to not only be a better steward of the environment, but allow the church community to pursue some of their other missions with the saved dollars.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. I will just be echoing a little bit of what Ms. Smith just suggested. I would like to thank the church for working with their neighbors to the north there, the residents of the fields. And that was one of the things that obviously we had heard more than anything else was those neighbors having some reservations about the aesthetic of it, especially at a higher height, and looking at 6.5 feet. And with the additional plantings and everything else, even though the fields does sit at a little bit of a higher elevation than the church property itself, I think that the church is really approaching this in a very, just in a great way, and in probably a way that fits the church's larger mission in general. And I would like to commend them for how this has come together and for the project that they're doing.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy.
I won't take a lot of time, and I won't just say ditto, but my counterparts have shared a lot of the things. So I'm, I guess, a little different angle. First, as most of my colleagues know, I'm a big fan of vitality and sustainability projects. So I laud the church and their efforts to pursue their mission goals while being good environmental stewards. It's a unique approach here in Normal, and I'm excited and thrilled to see how it goes for them, and for them to take leaderships to try to be the first one and go through these steps. Thanks to everybody, residents and church parishioners alike, for voicing your concerns and your supports, and for taking part in the public process. We have a public process, and it worked this time. It put proposer and concerned residents together, and the outcome was some modifications to try to make it work better in the environment. And I think that's the great story takeaway of this issue, is it's good ecologically and a good story about how our community can come together, have good conversations, and compromise to try and do good things. So thanks for staff for all your support of this project and trying to break new ground and do something cool and new in our community and support a good institution. I'm supportive. Thanks.
And I'll echo what you said, Mr. McCarthy, because I think this is important. This project really touches two major issues of our comprehensive plan going forward in times of environmental sustainability and smart city technology. It's good to see what could be characterized in this category as a private entity taking one of the first large steps in our community. And I applaud them for doing that. Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Nord.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the resolution is approved. We have one item of new business tonight, and that is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2021, in an amount not to exceed $2,100,000. And it's for the purpose of refunding the town's taxable general obligations bonds, Series 2010A Recovery Zone Economic Development Bonds.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Ms. Reese, do we have introductory?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. One quick comment. Actually, Mayor, we actually have 2 items of new business, so I don't want council to
Oh,
think
I'm
that
sorry.
you're done after this item. We have, we're eager to hear from our Connect Transit partners. But prior to hearing from Connect Transit, I do want to take a few minutes of your evening to talk to you about what we believe is a good strategy for the town's cash management and our debt management. And so Finance Director Andrew Hune is prepared to give you a highlight of what we're asking of you this evening. And on our call, we also have our partners in terms of our financial management and debt service strategies, including Todd Kraskowski from Mesero Financial. Todd has been with us for a number of years and helped us manage our financial strategies in regard to debt service and debt structuring. So Mr. Hune, I'm going to ask you to share kind of the highlights of what we're asking of council this evening.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Reese. You know, we've done this many times in the past. In fact, I count up the refunding bond issues we've done. We've done 7 in the last few years. Our bond model is structured in a way to give us that kind of flexibility every couple of years or even every other year to look at refinance opportunities in the market. The RZEDs, the 2010 Recovery Zone Economic Development Bonds, were issued back in 2010 as part of a government kind of stimulus package from the 2008 housing crisis. They became callable this year, which means we can either prepay them, we can essentially pay them off or refinance them. We always typically refinance. The market is very, very favorable. In fact, we're looking at probably, I would say, historic levels of low interest rates to refund these bonds. So we're asking council to do what we've done many times in the past to tweak our investment portfolio, to be as efficient with interest as possible, and also be efficient with liquidity and our cash flow. This is kind of step one in a larger model of managing our debt as we move forward in the next few years. Refunding is a very common thing to do. We're going to save, we think about $418,000 on this, which is sizable compared to the principal balance. We strongly encourage the council to approve this. Once approved, presumably, we will finish up rating calls with the rate agencies. We'll work closely with our bond counsel and our financial advisor and to work on the bond structure further and to get the bonds closed out by probably the first week in March. It's always exciting to get a bond refunded and particularly when the market is this good. To be able to pay a less of an interest cost to carry debt is always a good thing, and to maintain liquidity is kind of a balancing factor of that. With that, I can turn it over to Ms. Reese, and also do want to share with you, we do have both Mike Southworth, our bond counsel, who helped us draft these ordinances, and Todd Kraskowski with Mesero Financial, who helps us with a great deal of things in terms of financing the bonds, and you're all familiar with him. They're both available for any questions that I or Ms. Reese may not be able to answer to detail you're satisfied with.
Thank you, Mr. Hune. Before we turn it over to council's questions, I do want to point out that basically with council authorization this evening, we would refinance or refund the 2010 bonds, as Mr. Hune indicated. But as is always the case, we don't extend the duration of bonds. When we seek to refinance, we don't extend the duration. We refinance for the exact same timeline so we can take advantage of those interest rate savings. So I just wanted to point that out.
And Ms. Reese, you beat me to it. I was going to say exactly the same thing. Bring that up, make sure people understand that. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. I'm not necessarily opposed with refinancing because that does make sense to save money if we can, but we're given an opportunity right now where we can pay this completely off. We owe $1.8 million on it. And during our last meeting, we had our 2-on-1s here in, what is it, 14 or 16 months. We're planning on taking $8 million from the from reserves to pay off a different bond. Well, what I think would save taxpayers more and the town more is if we paid this bond off right now, just took the $1.8 million and just paid it off. We're done with it. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're going to be paying interest for the next 19 years. And I'm not sure exactly what the interest rate is or the amount we're going to be paying in interest, but based on what was provided us, had we not done anything, it'd be $220,000 in interest payments that we'd be paying, or at least 220,000. So if we subtract 400,000 from that, then we still have, essentially $1.8 million. So I guess I'm interested to hear from one of the finance guys, Mr. Kriskoski, his thoughts on paying this off now instead of extending it and just continuing with this interest-only loan.
Sure. Mr. Heenan, Mr. Kriskowski, I'll let you address Mr. Nord's questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, just to clarify here, there's a 1.855 million of outstanding 2010 bonds, okay? And in addition, you have to pay, you only pay interest every 6 months on the bond. So in addition to paying that, you have to pay the existing bondholders their interest up to the point in time that you retire the bond. So at the end of the day, the requirement of to repay the bonds is roughly $1.9 million. And then due to the lower interest costs, you will save the 400,000+ that Andrew Hune was talking about. As far as whether or not you pay the bonds off or refinance them, in the context of the current market, I think the best place to start is in the context of the current marketplace here. And what are your peer municipalities doing in this environment, given COVID and things like this? Well, first off, one of the things that the Federal Reserve has done is created in this tough environment, an environment where if municipalities, and for that matter, corporations in the midst of COVID, want to access the market to refinance debt, reposition debt, that type of thing, they've created an extraordinary environment to do that. So what people are doing, there's this term liquidity, which is very prominently mentioned in your most recent AAA rated credit rating report from Fitch, okay? And what liquidity is just like cash is king for us as individuals. When you get into times of uncertainty and you never know what the next demand from our family might be, or your family really is the community that you live in and that you serve as council members. And so what most people are doing, okay, in this environment, in particular municipalities, because you have a kind of another level of responsibility, is they're taking advantage of refinancing debt. In your case, you're not extending the debt. I will also tell you that there are plenty of communities out there that are in severe circumstances, okay, and they're having to extend debt to free up current liquidity in their budget. That's not the town of Normal. It's not the town of Normal largely because of the strong financial management and the favorable demographics and economic conditions that you are in. So predominantly, people in this environment are not just paying off debt because interest rates are low, and the value of preserving that liquidity, in this case, roughly $1.9 million, excuse me, is something that you then have available to you should you need to deploy it for whatever other circumstances you have. In addition, as Finance Director Hune mentioned, and I know he's gone over these things with the council, is for all your outstanding debt that you have for the community, you have a series of optional redemption dates that don't go away. And so as you look into the future, you can select to, if all of a sudden we're through COVID and all the uncertainties away and you want to pay off a future issue on a call date, you certainly can do that at a future point in time. But again, I think what most people are doing right now, okay, are taking advantage of the great rate environment, locking in the savings, and then preserving, preserving the capital at the lowest, arguably some of the lowest interest rates historically.
Okay, but in the town's position, we have a AAA credit rating. We should be able to acquire debt in the future if we need to. We're a little unique than a private business. Our reserves essentially are all the taxpayers that live in the town, so we can always go back to them. And we've got this money just sitting in reserves, rather than paying your company, because your company gets paid on the interest. I mean, that's how your company survives, correct?
No, we go out into the marketplace and sell the bonds to people who put in the best bids for the bonds.
Sure, and absent a bond,
we receive one fee at the closing for the bonds, but we don't receive the interest on the financing over time.
Okay, we have this money sitting in reserves. Cash is not king whenever it comes to a municipality because it's not working. We can always get more debt. We have a AAA rating. This just seems to me like we're trying to do a cash flow problem, kind of like going in to buy a car and not worrying about how much the total price of the vehicle is, just how low can we get the payments, for just as low as we can. So I don't necessarily agree with just refinancing this when we have the ability to pay it off and it just be gone. And now all those interest payments essentially come back to the town and we can start putting it into the general fund or wherever and benefit from that. So that is my thought. I brought this up in the 2-on-1 meetings as well. And while you're on the phone or on the call, do we have the ability, say in a year, to pay this one off if we extend this, or is it frozen for the next 10 years?
Well, the optional redemption date on these new refunding bonds would be like on the original bonds would be out roughly a 9 or 10 year period of time, right? So that is one of the agreements that you have with the people who buy the debt, who bid on the debt, that if they buy a bond that matures in 2039 and 2040, which these bonds do, they want the right to at least have those for a certain period of time, okay? But all of the debt in the community, again, and I know that Finance Director Hune has reviewed this with you, has deliberately, and really at the demand of your staff, has optional redemption features in it, so that when you get to certain economic conditions like we have now in COVID, or you have other things that you're planning for in the future, that you can use those prepayment opportunities to either pay off the debt, okay, refinance the debt at lower rates, or in the cases of some communities who are more stressed, they have to move the debt around to provide budgetary flexibility. I want to respect your concern, Councilman Nord, about being able to access the market. Certainly, okay, a AAA rated community, okay, has access to the bond market, right? It's really what you manage to as a community between the public body, the council people, and staff, okay? So it would be hard for me to believe that you wouldn't be able to access the market in the future. Anybody with a AAA rating would expect to be able to access the market. But the thing that we have to go to is really back the way we started the discussion here. And while you could always access the market at a future point in time, we really do have a substantially favorable interest rate environment with low interest rates, right? So effectively refinancing this at these very, very low rates, right? It's preserving yourself that cost-effective access to capital in the future. So otherwise, okay, you pay these off, and then if you need the money, then you go back and refit, and access the market again, perhaps at higher interest rates, right? So you make a judgment based upon the favorable interest rate conditions, understanding at the same time two things. Nobody can predict the future. I can't tell you interest rates won't go lower. But what Andrew Hune asked me before this, he said, Todd, if we didn't use that $2 million to pay that off right now, right? We have a series of optional redemption features that we can exercise over the next years, and we can deploy that money into debt repayment in the future. And that's absolutely true. Okay, and it's what really the staff has planned for over a long period of time.
Sure. And if we pay it off and we get debt in, say, 3 years, then we at least save 3 years of interest payments.
Mr. North,
Can always get back to the debt. But I would like to make a motion if I could.
Mr. Menard, you've exceeded your 10 minutes. We'll come back to you. Ms. Smith?
Thank you. So my understanding is that we're seeking to reduce our interest rate from an effective rate of 3.5% to 2%, keeping the same maturity date. And that action is expected to save us over $400,000 in interest payments. Not much different from when a homeowner who originally has a mortgage at a 4% rate sees 2%, they have the cash flow, they decide to refinance, but they're going to lower their payments. That's what we're doing. We're lowering our payments.
That is true, Ms. Smith. I just want to jump in. We don't know exactly what the interest rate is going to be. We hope it's somewhere around 2%. It could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower. That'd be great, but we're saying approximately 2%.
Well, I just watched
market
Janet
right now.
Yellen in her confirmation hearings today, so I think she's going to come through for us. But by refinancing now and not using our cash, we're preserving the ability to set aside $4 million in our general fund to save it for next year. So we're taking advantage of a known lowered interest rate environment this year to give us the flexibility to potentially in 2022, when we have another set of bonds maturing, look at paying off that debt, but only doing so once we're out of the pandemic, once we see that our tax receipts have improved, and when we can't control or know what the interest rate market might be like in 2022 when those debts become available. But we're taking advantage of low interest rates now, saving on interest payments to give us the flexibility to pursue possibly higher debt retirement in 2022. And I know my colleague is in favor of taking the $2 million and retiring it now, but I understand where that might be attractive, because I just finished reading the Pantograph last week, and in the 25 years ago segment, the town boasted of being debt-free 25 years ago. And I know there are citizens who look back on that time period and are frustrated that town carries any debt at all. However, we have made some sound investments with the debt we have taken on, and the staff has met and consulted with advisors to tell us how to effectively manage this debt. And to me, preserving our liquidity in these uncertain times would be comparable to if someone had a $15,000 debt and $15,000 cash. I, for one, during this pandemic, would not want to take all of that money, pay off the debt, and then not be prepared if the unthinkable happens and I lose my job. As a town, we have to be prepared for the unthinkable. As Mr. Nord pointed out earlier in the evening, we have projects like the Towanda Bridge project where we have some unforeseen contingencies occur. And so it's important for the town to be fiscally responsible, take advantage of this 2% interest rate or around that, possibly lower, not too much higher, fingers crossed. But that's the market we're working in now, and look ahead to positioning ourselves to have other options in a year from now when another round of debt becomes available for consideration. And so I'm in favor of this. I think it is the fiscally responsible thing, and it might generate a feel-good Facebook post to talk about paying off debt, but I don't think it's the responsible thing to do if we're not taking the long view of what could happen and what we are prepared to preserve our flexibility in meeting whatever this pandemic might still throw at us.
Mr. McCarthy. I'm sorry, Ms. Cummings and then Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
I kind of want to, I guess, in a sense, add a little bit to Councilmember Smith, and thank you for some of your comments tonight. If I'm not mistaken, as we are preparing ourselves and putting together continuously evolving our debt management plan, with looking at what we possibly could pay off to the future, my understanding that debt is technically larger than the one if we paid off today. Am I correct in that statement before I move on?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Yes, that is.
So in the long run, if we are patient enough and we put our eggs in the correct basket, we will do a better service being able to pay that one off at that time as we are foreseeing the future. So I do want to put that out there to those who are watching. Another thing is and I am so sorry, I don't want to mess up your name, Mr. Kraskowski, put out there, which he hit on something that came to mind as this discussion began. If you understand how these bond ratings are actually evaluated, what they do look at is, number one, what is our debt management plan? And is it sound? And we can't get a AAA bond rating without that. The other thing they look at is the liquidity. And if we were to pay off at this time, it would impact our reserves, which would jeopardize our liquidity, which could possibly jeopardize our rating. The other piece is what is in the reserves. They do look at what do we do with our reserves, how it is managed. And so when you put all three of those pieces together, we have to also be mindful of that. Yes, it does make for good headlines to say that we are debt free. I just also believe that we no longer live in a society where a lot of things are just debt free. You rarely see people pay cash for homes or pay cash for cars. So it's about how do we manage that? And for the town of Normal, our credit score is our AAA bond rating, but we have to look at a bigger picture than just paying off. Even with your own personal credit, you pay off a credit card and never use it again, you're not improving your credit score. It's the ability, can you get the debt and pay it off in a manageable way? So I think we have to take a bigger look at this. And I actually like the thought of how we're going to plan this out and be able to pay off a bigger debt in the very relatively near future. So I'm hoping that other council members are taking heed to this discussion and thinking about those things, not just for the immediate, but our long term.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. lower my hand. I'm gonna back up a little bit. Try not to be too redundant and not take too much time. A lot of good information's been shared already. First, I want to say thank you to Mr. Hewen and bond team, Mr. Kriskowski. Sorry if I murdered that.
Perfect.
For diligently and successfully managing to reduce our long-term debt expense. During my time on council since 2012, I mean, you guys have literally saved the town millions of dollars. I think it's over 10 million at this count, but I'll let Mr. Hewen answer that question at another time. But so at the outset, here we are again at it. So thank you for being on top of this all the time, trying to take advantage of our strong financial position to save the taxpayer money, because that's what you're up to. I'm excited by this opportunity to save interest costs. To me, it's another affirmation of our strong financial position and that we deserve a AAA. Ms. Cummings echoed this, and I want to echo Mr. Kriskowski's comments that our AAA is in large part because of our liquid cash reserves. And I think it's prudent that we don't lose sight of that because of the flexibility and the opportunity that affords us for strong fiscal management and a very aggressive, well-managed long-term debt portfolio. I support this proposal, of course, tonight because it saves over $400,000. I think that's a pretty simple math problem for all of us. But it also does a couple of other key things, or several other key things that are really, really important to us, specifically in this time during a pandemic. One, it doesn't hurt our current cash flows. Two, it preserves our liquid cash flows, our liquid reserves, as we've all talked about. But that provides flexibility to respond to what's coming up in the pandemic. We've kind of glossed over that a little bit now about uncertainty. But as we all know, we had to cut $9 million out of our budget this year in anticipation, and our revenues were certainly off. But liquid reserves are responsible fiscal policy right now to help us respond to those uncertainties right now. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. I do not support spending down of reserves at this time. But it also provides us the flexibility, as Ms. Cummings mentioned, at the right time to leverage even greater long-term debt savings. And that's important. There's opportunities in the future and a long-term debt management program that I know Mr. Hewen is going to be illuminating us on over time as we look into the future to continue to do a good, effective, fiscally responsible approach to this. And you're helping to set us up with good liquid reserves so we can take advantage of the future. For those very important reasons and strong fiscal or revenue concerns right now, I'm supportive of this program and really appreciate you bringing it to us. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Lorenz.
Hey, whoops, there we go. Yeah, a couple of comments I'd like to make. First of all, the debt is often talked about, certainly in this forum and sometimes even with our neighbors and friends. And, people have different philosophies about how much debt to incur and the risk and reward. And I guess what I want to highlight is that tonight is really the first, well, it's not really a first step, but it is a very deliberate step towards some very important steps that have been outlined to us that really paints for us as this council a very clear path towards the reduction of our debt and how that's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly as we know that the one of the more active TIF districts that has helped to be a source of debt service as that comes to a sunset in 2026. And so the whole plan that our finance team has outlined, I think, paints a very clear picture of how to do this very thoughtfully, very proactively, in a way that manages all those things that we have to, kind of competing interests, liquidity and interest rates and cash flow. And I, for one, really am impressed by the plan, the bigger plan that's been put together for us, tonight being the beginning of that. And has been also referenced that, bigger things to come in about 16 or 18 months, where we would take a significant chunk out of some of our debts. So to the tune of $8 million. So, let's not lose sight of that bigger picture and the longer term. And so to that end, I just really want to speak perhaps to the temptation that our colleague, Mr. Nord, is feeling tempted by, and that is to achieve today some short-term gain, maybe some political gain or optic gain in saying, oh, we eliminated a bond. When in reality, that may not be the most financially wise decision and could really put a future council in the next 2 to 5 years in some precarious positions of, as Mr. Nord said, having to go find some new money and going back to the taxpayers and asking for that new revenue. When you suggested that, my eyebrows went way high because I couldn't believe you were suggesting going back out to the taxpayers to seek new revenue. So I really would like to give as much flexibility and options to future councils and play out that longer term approach that really is very artfully been crafted here. So I think, like many of the others and our financial advisor, I'm just going to call him Coach K because that sounds like a better term for his last name. So I'm going to say that Coach K has advised us well, and I agree with the first step here of refinancing this 2010 bond. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Nord.
Thank you. The debt for this bond, Mr. Hune, can you put this on the screen? The payment stream for the 2010 RZ?
Do you have a presentation put together that is shareable right now, Mr. Hune?
I would need to find it in my files and then place it up there. I wasn't prepared to do that tonight, but I
maybe
yeah, if you would, then I'm going to ask a couple of questions while you're doing that, because I think it's important for us to get on the record what this payment stream looks like, so people watching in the future can see what it is.
I'm going to ask Mr. Hune to explain the payment screen. We're not going to bring it up.
Sure, well, he can.
Hey, Mr. Nord, I think
that's
it. Well, you're referencing, you're looking for
this
the
one
payout.
right there, this column here, all these numbers in white, these are all interest payments.
Right.
19 years of interest payments before we get down to these 2 payments of debt. So all those interest payments, that's not taking away from the town debt. Interest is not calculated in the debt number. So our action tonight is doing nothing to the town debt calculation. All it's doing is reducing the interest expense that we'll see over the next 19 years. So I want to be clear that nobody puts out there our action tonight is reducing debt. It is not. A vote to reduce debt with this $8 million in reserves, that will happen in a few years, even after my term on council is up for renewal. So I just want everybody to be aware of that.
Can I please address that comment? So let's be fair in the depiction here, okay? That's also my job as a financial person. So you borrowed $1.855 million, okay, in 2010 at a payment stream that you agreed to pay out through 2040. That's what the town did. When you look at, so that's $1.855 million that you got out to do a project, okay? And when you look at this stream of payments here, okay, that are over $400,000 lower, and you present value that back into today's dollars, okay, the present value of that is in the $350,000 to $400,000 range. So effectively, what you're doing here, right, is you're borrowing. You're able to borrow, okay, $350,000 to $400,000 less money, okay, because of that interest cost savings, okay. So you're getting a subsidy from the interest rate market of about $400,000 to reduce that debt.
Oh, I completely understand. We're paying to be able to have access, well, we're essentially paying for money. And, you know, the town has got this money sitting in reserves. It's not like we're taking it from someplace we don't have. We're not asking the taxpayers for more money. We're just taking money that's in our bank and going to pay this off. This would be similar to having a mortgage. And your mortgages, and you can refinance your mortgage. You decide, do I want to refinance this because I can take advantage of lower interest rates? Or since I've got the money in the bank, do I just pay it all off altogether? And the decision is, you know, do you want to pay someone else the interest so you don't have to take some money out of your bank account? Now, the town can always take on debt. You know, we always have that ability to do that. So again, I'm not for it. It seems like this is the credit card mentality where we've got all these credit cards and we're choosing not to pay one off. We just want to extend the payment terms on it. And it's not a cash flow problem because we have the money in reserves. So I'd like to make my motion. I'd like to move that we pay this bond off instead of refinancing.
So Mr. Nord, I'd ask you to make that as a motion as an amendment to this motion.
I move that we amend this motion to pay this bond off in full.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there discussion on the amendment?
I would like to discuss the amendment.
Would everybody take their hands down and we'll come back to the other. Ms. Smith has the floor. And then raise your hands.
I believe there's some confusion about the structure of a bond investment. Bonds traditionally pay interest and pay principal at maturity date. This is to give the bond investors a steady stream of income. And the strategy that was laid out by Mr. Yoon in discussions with council members was to not pursue paying off this debt during a pandemic, taking away our liquidity, potentially boxing us in, and instead look to in 2022, not years from now, not after anybody's term is over, because it's not over till 2023, but in 2022, bonds are callable, not $2 million, but $8 million in bonds are callable. And this refinancing now, when we have a favorable interest rate, is what is being recommended, as opposed to rolling the dice, taking all the available cash we have for this during a pandemic and taking our chances in the future when we don't know what the interest rate is going to be, and we wouldn't have the flexibility to retire $8 million in debt, up to $8 million in debt, because again, we do not know when this pandemic will end. But I think it is short-sighted to push for that action. Thank you. I would not be in favor of this amendment.
Example, and I think Ms. Smith, maybe, and Mr. Nord, you even referenced, you know, if I had a mortgage left a balance on my mortgage for my house of say $50,000, and I've got $50,000 in the bank, and it's a pandemic, and interest rates are at an all-time low. And the choice here for us is, do I exhaust my bank account and pay off my house? And I could do that. I could see the end of the tunnel, house is mine. Or because of the uncertain times, and you or I may lose our jobs, right? It's a pandemic, economic upheaval. Would you really exhaust all your reserves of your household in this time? Or would you say, you know what, I'm going to take advantage of the lower interest rates and hang on to my cash just in case I need that? Because these are so uncertain times. And for some of us, when we go and refinance our house, we actually even extend the length of the mortgage. But here for us, we're not doing that. We're keeping the same terms. We're not pushing it out to 2050 or 2060. We're keeping the terms exactly the same. So this is about whether or not we want to keep money in our savings account, or whether we want to find ourselves flat broke because the unthinkable happened. We lost our job. Major revenue stream stops coming in. I'm bouncing between the household and the town examples here, but I hope you're seeing the analogy here. Would you really exhaust your bank account right now, Mr. Nord? Rhetorical question. I support the original motion and do not support the amendment. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks. I'll be brief, Mayor. We're not considering political terms of office here. We're talking about the long-term strategic financial health of the town of Normal. That's the topic tonight. It's interesting that strong financial reserves are being applauded, and yet a recommendation to turn around and spend them all down is what's on the table tonight. It just doesn't make any logical, good fiscal sense to me as a former finance professional and a former accountant. I'll say the same thing I said before. I do not support spending down of the town's savings when we don't know what our revenues are going to be in the short term. It does not make good financial risk management sense. I support the original proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Mr. Hune, were you able to get that document so you can share it on the screen?
Actually,
yeah.
Mr. Nord, just to ask you a question.
This is for the public record. This is for our citizens to look at.
Mr. Nord just asked the question.
Sure. Mr. Hune, will you please put that on the screen?
He can answer your question without sharing the screen.
Sure, I'm happy to do that either way. The schedule that you were showing on your camera, Councilman Nord, was a schedule that we shared with council as part of a discussion about the future for our debt program. And I'm going to step back just a moment to say we take the debt program very seriously. We look at all the issues. I'm talking to Todd Kreskowski all the time about refunding opportunities. He doesn't necessarily know our side of our cash needs in the future. He has a good feel for the uncertainty associated with municipal government right now in terms of pension costs, capital needs, uncertainty with COVID response in terms of revenues coming back. We will absolutely need that $2 million in the future. There's no doubt in my mind about it. The fundamental thought process is simply we wish to recommend enjoying a lower interest rate now with this bond issue refinancing and using that cash in the future. Now, when I say in the future, that could mean a lot of things, and you will have another bite at the apple per se. We will have other refunding opportunities coming up in the next year and the following year and the following year, but we will have to decide as a council through staff recommendation if we're going to refinance or pay off or a combination of either. But I can guarantee you the $2 million will be needed in short order in the future to fund operations, to fund capital needs, to fund pensions, to fund potential refunding in the future. So we don't look at this in a haphazard way with a singular decision in mind. We think about liquidity, we think about future interest rates, which we expect will not be this low. So we feel good about the recommendation. Now, what you're suggesting is not necessarily unreasonable. That's certainly true. To pay off debt is always a good thing. We are just saying to pay off debt right now is not the right thing, as right a thing to do. We feel it's more appropriate to refinance, enjoy a very low interest rate, and deploy that cash later on for potentially another bite at a payoff. And that's coming up. So that was a little bit more conversation and some fundamental thought process. Getting to your direct question, Mr. Nord, the schedule you showed, yes, we're going to have 20 interest payments. The schedule you see shows $116,865 per year for 20 plus years or 20 years before we pay off the principal. A little bit more needs to be known. We show that schedule as being the total interest cost. Not to throw some detail at the council on this particular bond issue, but it's a taxable bond issue at 6.3%. The federal government gives us a subsidy to help us pay the interest cost. So the true interest cost annually for this particular bond issue is about $67,000 a year. So it's a little different, which is why I was hesitant to put that on the screen and say, this is our interest cost. That's the true interest cost of the bonds, but we have another funding source besides town revenue that helps us support that cost. So we're talking $67,000 per year for 20 years. Again, the fundamentals still apply. Pay the debt off with cash or refinance. Our position is, given the liquidity needs of the future, given our entire bond program where we have other possibilities of refinancing or paying off debt at a higher rate, we feel it's appropriate.
The other thing I'll jump in and indicate is staff was not prepared to show our materials that we shared with you last week, but certainly we had indicated to council members that during our budget review, which is next week, Tuesday, we intended to go over much more detail in terms of our multi-year strategy, because that's what you will see in our 5-year budget. So I'm sorry, Mr. Nord, we weren't prepared to show spreadsheets and the like. Certainly we'll talk in more detail next week, but when reviewing the spreadsheet that you held up to the camera, as Mr. Nord or Mr. Hune indicated, there's more to the story than just that column.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to call the question, Mayor. I'd like to
The
call the
total
question, Mayor.
revenues, I'm sorry, I still have the floor.
I'd like to call the question, Mayor.
No, he actually does have the floor, according to my new rules handed to me. He does have the floor to finish.
Mr. Hune, what are the total reserves that the town has? Do you have an estimate?
The town attempts to maintain a 15% reserve in the general fund. We have reserves in water and sewer. We have reserves in health plan. We have reserves in our capital funds. I haven't got that at my fingertips right now, but it's certainly in the tens of millions.
Is that 15% of the budget?
15% of general fund.
So do you have a ballpark when you're talking $10 million, $30 million?
Yeah, it's anywhere between 10 to $12 million in general fund.
10 to $12 million of reserves. So this is by no means asking to deplete all of our savings. And I just wanted that to be clear and on the record that I'm not asking to deplete all of our savings. We're talking $2 million out of an estimated $12 million of reserves. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And you know, we had a similar discourse before. So this isn't against staff. It's just a different mindset for managing money. Everybody's different. So I do appreciate your perspective, but thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just have one more comment before council votes on the amendment, just to clarify, there was a statement made a few minutes ago, actually, it was, I don't know, it was probably 15 minutes ago or so. Mr. Nord indicated that in a few years, we would be looking to pay off $8 million or so in debt. And I just want to clarify, it was said a couple of times this evening, we are hoping to be in a position in 16 months from now, approximately June of 2022, to pay off $8 million or so of debt. And that was part of our strategy in terms of recommending to council this evening that we refinance this particular bond. So we are in a position to retain those $2 million from the 2010 bond that we're talking about tonight to help cushion our general fund. So we're in a better position to pay off $8 million in 15 months, 16 months.
Please call the roll on the amendment.
Mr. McCarthy,
No.
Ms. Cummings,
No.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
No.
Mrs. Lorenz,
No.
Mr. Preston,
No.
Mayor Kus,
No, the amendment fails. We're back to the original motion. Seeing no discussion on that, please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord, Mr. Nord, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The ordinance is approved. We move to item 10, which is a presentation by Connect Transit.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to introduce the team that's on the call this evening. I'm appreciative of the Connect Transit Board of Trustees representatives that are on the call tonight. We have Chairman Mr. Whitehouse, Ms. Heil, Mr. McHugh, and Mr. Rao, who are the town's appointees to the Connect Transit Board of Trustees. And we also have interim general manager, Mr. Peterson. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Whitehouse and Mr. Peterson.
Well, thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and Town Manager Reese. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. I will move through this kind of quickly since it's later in the night, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end of this. So we start the presentation, please. Give us 1 second here. Sorry about that. Go ahead and, yep. As Town Manager Reese said, myself, Mark Peterson, Julie Heil is our Board Vice Chair, and Tim McHugh, and Amandava Rao are on the call as well, just as here to participate and hear concerns directly from the council. So they'll be here to hear what you have to say. I want to start with our fiscal year operating budget. Obviously, our 2021 operating budget is about $14.5 million operating budget. Breaking that down, our operating revenue, about 65% of that comes from the Illinois Department of Transportation, about $9.33 million. Surprisingly, IDOT is pretty secure in paying those funds to us. They might not pay other bills, but they pay us pretty routinely. The federal government accounts for about 14%, or about $2.1 million of that operating budget. And then the operating revenues through fares and advertising accounts for about 12%, or about $1.675 million of the operating budget. Locally, thank you to your community and the city of Bloomington, a total of about 9% of our budget comes from the two municipalities, or about $1.382 million. Normal contributes about $541,480, and Bloomington contributes $840,520. Talking about COVID, obviously this system has taken that very serious, like a lot of people have. We have implemented some practices and policies that we implemented right away, and we're still making sure that those are happening. So regular bus cleanings are happening. Every 4 hours, buses are brought back to our facility and a deep clean has happened. We've hired staff that cleans those buses every 4 hours. That's unique. Most systems do that every 24 hours. We think it's important enough that we do it every 4 hours. Ever since the pandemic started, there's been rear door boarding. So that's a safety precaution. The riders don't come in contact with the drivers or vice versa. Of course, face coverings are required. Also, our system does provide COVID-19 testing site service. I think it's about 3 times a week from the health department, which is right next to one of our transfer stations, to the McLean County Fairgrounds. About 3 times a week, they can get on there and get out to the COVID testing site. Fares have been suspended since March 18th of 2020. Our board has thought that's really important just because, again, the safety, the transfer of money, the transfer of people having to talk. Remember, we're back in the back, boarding at the back of the entrance of the bus. That fare suspension has been approved through March, and we have received money to help pay for that, but we have approved not to take fares until March. We will be discussing in February what we will do, deciding going forward. To show you kind of what's happened here, in fiscal year 19 ridership, we had 2.5 million rides. And the year of COVID, it's still a pretty substantial number, but about 1.6 million rides, 1.7 million rides, approximately a 30% decrease in our ridership. But you can tell, even with our precautions and all that stuff, ridership in our system is a necessity for a lot of people in this community. The great news that we're really excited about here at Connect Trans, and I think it's a direct result of the success and what we are doing here. This type of money doesn't come to a system unless you're running efficient, successful systems. Early in 2020, we got a $9.92 million grant from the capital plan, really, from the state of Illinois Department of Transportation. That's going to help us improve those services in downtown Bloomington. And also that'll help us purchase 4 35-foot electric buses. And then also our Better Bus Stop campaign. It'll help us improve 90 stops on our bus stop improvements. That $9.9 million will go towards those things that I've listed. We also received, I think, second quarter of 2020, $8 million from our federal agencies for the Bus and Bus Facilities Grant from the FTA. That is designed to use on the transfer center in downtown Bloomington. That money is appropriated to spend on the downtown transfer station. That's all we can spend that money on. It will go to the downtown transfer station. We also received about $650,000 in a solar infrastructure project, something that we're really excited about here. We are getting electric buses. The solar project, though, really is, we are going to put solar, you talked about it a little bit earlier, but we're going to put solar power on our facility here at Connect Transit. And we anticipate that that energy that will offset the cost of the energy used here at Wiley Drive. And then we will actually also be able to even sell excess energy back to the grid. So we'll see a little bit of a revenue there as well. The projects also will help provide for the charging of the equipment and infrastructure for the electric bus fleet, which I kind of mentioned at the beginning here. So in total in 2020, Connect Transit received $19+ million in grant money, grant money, debt-free, money coming back to the citizens of Bloomington Normal, the riders of Bloomington Normal, from the state of Illinois and from the federal government. We've talked about this in the past, but this is really important to our board, still a top priority, the Better Bus Stop campaign. It's still our goal, and with the grants that we've received, our goal is by 2024, we'll be 100% compliant with the ADA at every one of our bus stops. The total stops that we completed in fiscal year 2020 were 35. The total stops to be completed in 2021 are 86. 31 of those stops completed so far in fiscal year 21 in normal. Total stops scheduled for 2022 are 100, and 42 of those stops are scheduled for normal. We did launch an interactive map in 2020, which riders can go and see where we are on each one of those bus stops, where we are in the progress of doing that. So a top priority for us. If you remember, a few years ago, we created the Connect to the Future work group with the advice of both councils. We implemented that. We have implemented the status of the work. We've implemented a lot of that. The recommendations, the ones that we're really proud of, is the one rate for all. We're taking rates from $1 on the fixed routes up to $1.25, but we're also taking Connect Mobility down from the $4 plus to $1.25. The grant. So we have implemented that. Obviously, since we've implemented fare free, everyone is riding for free, even Connect Mobility, which is our largest expense, but that's free. So once we implement fares again, fixed route or Connect Mobility will cost $1.25 to ride our service. And then we've also expanded the Connect Mobility service to the town and the city limits. Before we had regions, it got more expensive the farther out you got from fixed routes. But as long as you live within the town limits or the city limits, you can get Connect Mobility for $1.25. Again, talked about this before, but the Better Bus Stop campaign completion by 2024, that's also a recommendation from the work group. And then the future action we'll take with additional funding once we receive and can find additional funding going forward. Obviously, everyone's aware of what's been going on at Connect Transit. Mark Peterson has stepped in as the interim general manager here. We are in the middle of a general manager search. We as a board have decided to hire a firm called Harris Rand Lusk. They're a firm out from the New York area. They specialize in transit professionals. The nice tie is the individual that we're working with actually has a tie to Illinois, was born and raised in Illinois, so understands the state and knows kind of what he's looking for, what we're looking for as well. The firm's interviewed the Connect Transit Board of Trustees and senior staff. We will be reaching out to talk to you all and to other stakeholders to make sure that the input from those groups are heard, and we take that into account when we hire someone. One of the things I really want to touch on this is we do have a community survey out there. It's on our social media, it's on our website. Anyone that's in the community, especially our riders, we'd love you to go on there and fill out that survey and share with us what you think the next general manager should look like and what qualities they should bring to the table when we hire them. So the position will be posted in early February. We're finalizing that right now. And we hope to have the hiring decision made in March of this year. And hopefully, depending on where that individual is, end of April, we have a new general manager on staff here at Connect Transit. One of the things that we heard in under my chairmanship and working with staff is we brought this route review process coming in 2021, where we used to do this a long time ago, but from my understanding, but if individuals in the community have a suggestion for a route or where there needs to be a bus stop, on the website, there will be an opportunity for community members to submit those ideas via the website to Connect Transit. Operations will investigate the request, applying data-driven analysis, just like we do currently with our routes. The results of that analysis will be presented to a subcommittee of the Connect Transit Board. And then the final determination will be shared back with the individual that made the request. So we won't leave that individual hanging. We'll share with them why we are going to take their recommendation or why we have decided not to take their recommendation. And that we will hopefully have that implemented by March of this year. The next slide, not in your community, but something that ties to our community as a larger thing is our downtown Bloomington transfer station. We are fully funded for this. Zero debt will be taken on for the center from the grants that we've received from IDOT or from the federal government. We are ready to move. We have retained a project manager. The site analysis study is nearing the completion. The final site candidates to be announced hopefully in late January or February. It looks like, to be honest with you, we are going to be able to make those announcements in the next 2 weeks or so. The final site selection we are hoping to make in March, and then we'll proceed with the site acquisition. And then we expect, and we are hoping, and I'm pushing hard, that we will have this project completed by the third quarter of 2022. I know it's not in your community, but the downtown Bloomington project is vital to this system. It's our number 2 transfer station right now. It meets no of the amenities that our riders expect or deserve. It's a safety issue, and it's a top priority for this system. So with that, Mayor, members of the council, and Town Manager Reese, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Council member have questions. Ms. Smith?
Yes, and I don't know who the appropriate person is to answer this, but are the bus drivers eligible for vaccine under 1B?
Yes, so they are, transit professionals are. in that class. I do know we have staff that have signed up, but I know that I know the county is struggling to get all of them. So I think it's been backed up a little bit, but yeah, transit employees can get the vaccination.
And I had the article from the Panagraph about a public input sought on the general manager post. When's the deadline for citizens to provide you with that feedback?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're going to keep that open until, I say we're going to keep that open until we probably make a final decision because, you know, it's important to hear. So they have some time, but I would encourage them to do it sooner rather than later to make sure that the board has time to review all that and their voices are heard.
And I saw your data on the ridership down. I would not want to be someone recommending a route during this pandemic. When do you have any feel for if the ridership is increasing? Have you been doing the month to month to see if you see some improvement in ridership?
Yeah, great question. We have seen ridership come back month after month. It's growing, not substantially, but it's growing each month. We're getting more and more people to come back. The more things are opening up, I'm assuming that more in dining restaurants are open. We might see that our ridership goes up a little bit as well, but we see that increase a little bit each month. Yep.
And then I want to applaud Connect for adopting the one fare for all. I know that that was something that the community that is reliant on mobility was very passionate about, that it was a real financial burden to pay those fares. And I am so thankful that the board adopted that policy, and also to extend the fares out, to the city limits so that you can serve more people who are in need of that. And one final question, has the Connect Transit Board now been given their own individual email addresses so that if anyone wants to contact them directly, they may do so?
Yes, so thank you, Councilmember, for the comments about the one rate for all. Our board unanimously supported that. We agree with that philosophy. We had to make sure that we could fund it, but once we found that solution, we were happy to adopt that. Yes, when I became chairman, I know that was a request of yourself and others on the council and other community. We do have a standard email for board members. It's the first initial of their name and their last name at connect-transit.com. So it's the same email addresses across the board. Yep.
And all of that information can be accessed on the website?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Couple questions. So with the new process to put route requests on the website, over the past few years, there's been several requests, one from Midwest Food Bank, from the Landings, the ARC Center, and some other transit-dependent neighborhoods and trailer parks that lost service or would like service, new service. Do they have to resubmit all this information and the petitions that were turned in, or can you guys look at it, or are they still something you're not going to consider?
Well, Mr. Nord, I think to answer your question fairly, all those requests were reviewed in the past. Staff took those requests, we reviewed those, used data, not only from our data, but from regional planning's data, and we found it not to be an efficient use. It's an unfortunate, I understand, I wish we could provide more coverage, but staff used the data, it found not to be efficient. So if someone would like to resubmit that, by all means, I encourage them to do that when this is up and running and we can look at the data again. Again, we are constantly looking at routes and constantly looking at ways that we can provide more coverage, but it does come down to data and ridership and the financials. And then specifically to the one issue, I'd like to address that with you, is Midwest Food Bank. I checked with staff here and former general managers. Midwest Food Bank has never made a formal request to us. So if they would like that, we would be happy to talk to them. But a formal request from Midwest Food Bank has never been made to Connect Transit.
Oh, I was not aware. Yeah, I can forward you the email that they sent to, I believe, well, and I forwarded it to the council, and I know
Yeah,
the previous general manager. So I will forward that on so you can get in touch, because
please do.
that's good to know that you
forward
don't
that.
have that contact info.
Please do forward that to the general manager. And I would also encourage you, if you have a contact out there, if that's still their request, have them reach out to us as well. So we know that they'd like that to have us to do that, please.
Okay. And then the IGA states that Connect is supposed to be presenting the budget to both town councils. That has not happened over the past, I don't know, from what I understand, many years. Is that going to change? Are you going to
Yes.
start presenting that?
Yes. So I was up, I'm a Bloomington appointee, as you know, and Bloomington councils have asked that question. And I made that commitment to the council that I report to as chairman, that would happen. Staff is finalizing that, and we will present that here within the next month.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, we will be sending, this is Mark Peterson, we'll be sending a preliminary budget to both city managers next week.
Okay.
And then we'll be happy to present to council or provide additional details or information as you request.
So we heard that a lot. And so, yes, that's going to happen.
Okay, good. And for both Bloomington and Normal, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Then you guys have received, gosh, a lot of money, $19 million. With all that money received, has any of that gone towards expanding service to areas that didn't have it?
Yeah, good question, Mr. Nord. And let me explain this. And when the Illinois Department of Transportation, or FTA, gives us a grant award, we've applied for those, and we have said that this is where the money would be used, or there are special grants. Like, so for the bus and bus facility grant, which was about an $8 million grant, it has to be used on buses or bus facilities. We applied for that. We don't have the discretion when the grant is awarded to us to say, okay, we're not going to use it on bus or bus facilities. We're going to divvy that up and provide larger coverage. We have to use that money for what the grant is awarded towards and what the grant application says it must be used for. And those are those are set out by state and federal guidelines for us to receive those monies. So to answer your question, no, we haven't had those conversations because we're not allowed to have those conversations. We can't take that money and spend it elsewhere.
Is there grant funding opportunity to actually expand service?
I'm sure there is. We have teams in Springfield and Washington that are constantly looking for that type of stuff and all that stuff. I know that you would like us to look at expansion, and we are always trying to look at expansion too. But without those resources, it's pretty hard to do.
I will add, Ryan, if I may, the lion's share of the grant programs we're talking about were eligible for our capital programs.
Yeah.
There are very few grant programs for operations because those typically require a long-term commitment, where these are sort of one-time lump sum grants. So it's very difficult to find these kinds of grants for operations. Now, I will say that even though these are for operations, in this case, bus stops, transfer center, new buses, that obviously helps to improve the overall level of service that we provide riders, and hopefully more riders will avail themselves of the service and find it to be a convenient and very economical option for transportation around the community. But Mr. Whitehouse is right, those cannot be used for operations. We have other funding sources through the state and feds for operations. Many of those are a function of how much local dollars we bring to the table. And we're fairly limited on our local dollars. We appreciate every cent we get from the two communities. And we do leverage those to get more state and federal money, but we are somewhat limited in that regard. But again, I don't want to suggest there's lots of grant programs out there for operations. There just aren't many, if I don't know of any right now, but as Ryan said, we're always on the lookout.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure. And I would just put out there that what I hear from the community members is they see the money going towards the buses, the structures and things. And the typical response is, doesn't matter how great it is if the bus doesn't come by where I live and where I work. So if you can have your grant folks start looking for a way to get the bus closer to where the transit dependent live and work, then that's going to help the constituents who we both represent and who pay for all of Connect to Exist, whether it's coming from the town, the money that the town takes from them, or the state or the federal government. But
Yeah,
thank you.
We agree. Let me point something out, else I can do this. Before COVID, our ridership numbers were going to be our third largest ridership numbers in Connect Transit history. And year after year, I feel that our staff and our board has done a pretty good job of trying to provide the most coverage and going to locations where the transit dependent individuals are. And the proof is in the data, and our numbers keep increasing from that. So I hear you. We're always trying to expand, but we are in the locations where those transit dependent people are. Not everywhere, understand that, but we're doing pretty good coverage.
Sure. And I respect that you look at data, but data doesn't pick up the phone and call me or ride the bus. So the citizens, those are the ones that I listen to more than just looking at the data. But thank you, and I do appreciate the other perspective.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't really have a question. I was just really glad to see a couple things within the presentation due to the fact that I know these have been things that were paining many of our citizens. As Ms. Smith pointed out, the one fare for all, I am so glad that we're able to do that and have that available to our residents in the community. Certainly helps with equitability for many of our riders. And so I think that is such a great opportunity. The other piece is I'm excited to see that we are able to get the grant dollars that are highly limited, especially within 2020 due to COVID. I think when people are not educated on what federal grants and state grants really entail, they miss the opportunity to celebrate anytime, whether it's Connect Transit or even the town of Normal, get these grants. These are highly competitive. We are not the only ones applying for them. Technically, there's always fewer dollars available than what's always requested. And so when we are able to take advantage of that, it is a great thing and a great day. And it does speak to how well the organization is continuously evolving and becoming better. And what it's saying is that the federal government and the state government is in support of it and gives you, in a sense, some assistance. So I am so excited to hear about that. I love the idea for, the opportunity for people to share their concerns if there is a need for a stop somewhere, because, some have said that there's not adequate stops. We do have to make informed decisions. The reality is that, as you have brought up and has been mentioned, I think General Manager Peterson has brought up, it's not really a capital. It's usually capital that is supported through grants and not operational. So that then means that if we want further comforts that may not fit into the scope of assistance, then we may have to take a look at, even the town boosting our share of the pie, in which we give when combined. Both Normal and Bloomington only do 9%, and Bloomington taking that lion's share. So, you know, these are things we have to think about as a community as well as a council when we also make some of those recommendations. But I'm glad to hear that you are taking an informed decision as you move forward and continue to expand and do well. I'm looking forward to more of what Connect Transit will do and what we can continue to build and bring to our community. Thank you for your time and your presentation this evening.
Thank you, council member. Appreciate it.
And Ms. Smith?
I just had a follow-up question that as you're collecting data, if it would be possible to note when an ADA stop is complete, to track the before and after ridership at that location, and because it may have some impact on improving either use of that stop or converting mobility transit passengers from that service to the main line. So if it's possible, if someone could make the effort to just track the dates that those stops come online, and then analyze the data surrounding that, I think it might provide some insights.
Thanks, council member. Yes, of course. The interactive map, like we kind of discussed, will tell people when that comes online, and we can track that data. So yes, we can do that.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks, Mayor. Make sure I lower my hand. Thanks, Mr. Whitehouse and Mr. Peterson and everybody else from Connect Transit. You're not all on my screen at the same time. I gotta swipe back and forth to see y'all. But thanks for being here and your presentation. I appreciate you staying with us at this late hour and sitting by while we conduct other business. So I appreciate your patience and welcome back, sort of, Mr. Peterson. Sort of. I guess first I want to say, wow, I knew our local funding was a relatively smaller portion of the Connect Transit budget, but I didn't realize, did I see that right? It's less than 10% of the overall budget, the local funding sources. Wow, that's an amazingly low number for what we're getting in the transit system. So I was actually pretty shocked by that. I didn't realize it was that low. I also, somebody else, I don't recall who, applauded the decision for the one rate policy. Maybe that was Ms. Smith, but and your willingness to work through to find a solution to funding it. I think it's the right decision for our community and a really great goal. And thanks for working that out. I'm highly supportive. Thank you. Thanks for the explanation on the grant dollars, because certainly I've heard the comments that, you know, we should take all the money coming into transit and do other things with it. And thank you for making the public statement that those grant dollars have strict rules for what you can do with it. And I think that's really important for the public to hear out loud, is that capital projects are being funded by capital grants. We're not taking operational fundings, or you're not taking operational fundings away from things like, you know, serving transit dependent neighborhoods or other things and putting them at capital projects, but rather the transit system values both capital investments and serving transit dependent riders. That both are priorities and are important to the transit system. I think it's a very important point that there's a lot of confusion about in our community. So thanks for this. And I hope we'll continue to see you guys and hear those messages about what you're doing and distinguish between these capital grant funded projects and what we're doing on the ridership side. But as Ms. Cummings pointed out, it also shines a light on the hard reality that in order to expand routes, the system needs more funding. Is that we can't serve everybody and meet all the routes. I know the Connect to the Future work group, one of the recommendations is for Bloomington and Normal to up our local matches to help get more grant dollars, I believe, from the state or more greater funding from IDOT. But to have a look and have the ability and flexibility to be able to look at additional route adds. I know we've got an upcoming budget session for the town of Normal. It's a very difficult time with pandemic revenue. I know you guys know that very well, and that's not lost on you. That is, and it comes as no surprise for me to say that is a very difficult conversation for us to be having right now. As painful as that is for me to say, as a strong supporter of our transit system and a big fan of what you guys are doing. So I do have one question. Great report and great progress, and I appreciate that transit ridership is increasing, and that's really good to hear. One question I've heard out about where the bus stop is and servicing the VA clinic. Can you speak to that a little bit about where this bus stop is located and the service there? And I've heard some concerns about that one.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for your comments, Councilwoman McCarthy, and thanks for your support. Yeah, so the VA clinic, again, as a refresher, Connect Mobility will provide door-to-door service for anyone within the town or city limits if they have an appointment at the VA, even if they don't have ADA needs. If they don't have what's the word I'm looking for? If they don't have the qualifications, ADA certification. If someone calls and says, I'd like to go, I have an appointment at the VA, I live at said address in Normal, can you pick me up on Tuesday at this time? We take them there and we'll pick them up. We've done that from the beginning. We've done that even before COVID at no cost because we believe in serving our veterans and making sure that they have those things. So we have it. We do have the data, and we're happy to share that data. The stop is within acceptable distance of bus routes, and ridership has not gone through the roof on that. Actually, as a matter of fact, we have data that says, especially with that VA, that front door service, it turns out only about 9 trips were actually completed on that. So while we're happy to give that, it's not taken by a lot of individuals. So, and actually of those 9, a few of them were actually canceled the day of or right before the route. So the VA service, we have a fixed route right there within acceptable, but we have better than some would say a ride share, or I call it the limo service. We have better than a limo service. We'll actually pick you up at your front door and take you to the front door of the VA clinic. So thanks for asking that question, so we can hopefully our veterans in our community can understand and hear from this conversation that we're here to make sure that you can get to the VA clinic.
Well, I greatly appreciate you guys addressing that in public, and beyond that, on a personal note, that's the right thing to be doing, to be offering free service to our veterans, to the VA clinic, to the front door. It's important to have a fixed bus route stop. I absolutely agree for those that are able and want to do that. But to support our veterans that have served for our country by free rides to their appointments at the front door, it's just the right thing to do. And regardless of the low use, I hope we continue to offer that. I hope we continue to market that so the word gets out as best we can, that's available. I know you work on that already, but I think that's a good and valuable, important service for our veterans.
And
that's all I have.
And Councilman McCarthy, if I could say one more thing about that. When the VA was being built, Connect Transit knew about that. And we had extensive conversations with the VA about how can we play into this. And it was ultimately the VA's decision on kind of their property and what we're going to do. And the VA actually, by their standards of other systems and all that stuff, where our fixed route stop is, the VA has told us it is perfectly within acceptable distance from what they do in other communities.
Well, it's good to hear that you're communicating with the VA. I knew that there was conversations going on. I didn't know the substance of all of them, but I'm happy to hear that from the inception, there was communication between you guys and them, and that you all agreed were the fixed bus stop. But again, even more than that, to highlight here, one of the really good news stories of the Connect system is that they're going well above and beyond that to make sure vets that need it can get to the front door free of charge. So thanks again for the presentation and what you're doing right now. I appreciate it.
Mr. McCarthy, if I might just add, I'm sorry, I had to restrain myself from not jumping in on the bond refinancing discussion.
I bet you did.
Back some old times, but and by the way, congratulations on the AAA rating. That's a phenomenal accomplishment, particularly given the current state of our economic situation nationally. But you just to touch on the financing question, and I've only been here a little over a couple of months, so I'm learning a whole new side of Connect Transit, and I can't tell you how impressive it is for this system to do what they do with a $14.5 million budget. Now that's a lot of money, I understand that, but the service level is quite extraordinary, and we do get limited local dollars. Not complaining, we're okay with that, and frankly, everything that I can see, the system's in sound financial condition. I think that's to the credit of the board and good staff. But just as a comparison, a community right down the road that's very similar in size and maybe in demographic, Champaign-Urbana, and they have a tremendous local transit system. It's well thought of across the nation. But they have, compared to Connect's $14.5 million budget, their budget is over $60 million. And basically a similar sized community. Now they do get some substantial dollars from the university, and they are a local taxing authority. So they have the ability to raise more local money, which they can generate for additional state and federal dollars. And again, we're not complaining, but I think it's important people understand they get a tremendous value here at Connect Transit. This community, it's a tremendous value for, I think, kind of a bargain price for transit services. And I always thought that, but now that I'm out here and digging into the details, I've really come to appreciate what a great value Connect is. And I think it's important that everybody understand that. And again, it's a well-run, efficient system that's in good financial condition. We have our challenges in COVID, like everybody does, but we're managing our expenses and getting by and doing quite well, I think. So I wanted to add that. I think it's an interesting parallel looking at Champaign-Urbana, which is a great transit system. Not to take anything away from them, but we provide an awful good one as well at a much cheaper, at much less cost.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Peterson. Again, I thought our less than 10% funding was a good story for everything that we're getting, but to hear that their budget is 4 times the size of our budget for a similar sized community, 400% larger budget than ours. Wow. We're doing an amazingly good job. Thanks for sharing that detail. I had no idea. I appreciate that.
Ms. Reese?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. We've heard a number of times that Connect Transit should be considering service to certain locations. Was mentioned tonight, Midwest Food Bank, Landings Mobile Home Park, and other such locations. I just wanted to point out, again, it was mentioned somewhat by Mr. Whitehouse, but I think part of the formula is it is based on the evaluation using objective criteria and best practices. Connect Transit is not going to kind of reinvent the wheel. There are standard criteria and evaluation for fixed route services, best management practices for transit systems, and certainly council understands that, you know, if a citizen were to call and ask for a particular fixed route to serve their home or their neighborhood, Connect Transit staff is going to be evaluating that based on objective criteria that generally is accepted as a best management practice. And I know that we've reviewed some things through the Federal Transit Administration and some guidelines that they accept, have that Connect Transit adopts. So there's objective criteria to look at these sorts of things. But I just wanted to remind council, and we've talked about this before, the kind of requests that that have been brought to our attention that we continue to hear, Midwest Food Bank, Landings Mobile Home Park, and others, those have generally been referred to multiple times as first mile, last mile solutions. And so there's formulas in place to evaluate those as well. So I just wanted to take the opportunity, since we're talking about fixed route and how people can make a request for an additional fixed route service, that we all have to understand there has to be some sort of criteria to evaluate that. And even if Connect Transit were to give something a try and attempt or pilot a fixed route, there has to be some criteria to determine whether or not it works or not long term. So what those criteria are, I don't know, but I do know that we try not to reinvent the wheel, and we're going to be using best practices and federal transit guidelines to do that evaluation. But also on the flip side, just to remind council, what we haven't yet defined are those first mile, last mile solutions. And that will always be part of the formula. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to create new fixed route stops for a bus to go out to a certain neighborhood.
Thank you. Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Ms. Smith had reminded me to mention something, so thank you, Ms. Smith. With the Better Bus Stop upgrades, I'd like to request that you coordinate, and you may already be doing this, but coordinate with LifeSil and like Mark First, and just let them know when these stops are being upgraded, so that way they can let their folks know. And as far as the VA stop, I understand you've talked with the VA, which is, the hospital organization, but please reach out to the veterans groups that advocate for the veterans, the actual users, like AMVETS, American Legion, the VFW, Marine Corps League, and probably a whole plethora of others that I apologize to the ones that I missed, because those are the folks that I know have been advocating for a closer fixed route stop. So just trying to put you in touch with the people that contact me anyway.
Yeah, so to that point, Mr. Nord, let's take those up. Thanks for those points of contact and appreciate that. So the point about the Better Bus Stop campaign, I think that our staff does do a pretty good job of communicating that to agencies like Mark First and LifeSil. But just a reminder, on our website, we have the interactive map that's on there that anyone can go on at any time, and it shows where in the progress that bus stop is. Is it nothing's been done to it? Is it in the middle of the project, or it hasn't been completed? So our staff is constantly having those conversations, but if they need an answer right today, now, and our staff's not available, the website is available for them to look at that. And then to the second point about the VA, of course, we want to make sure that we can make things as easy as possible for our veterans. We have talked to the VA, we've talked to the agencies. Again, Mr. Nord, we've had this conversation, and I encourage you again, those individuals that are reaching out to you, I would ask you to ask them to reach out to us, because at our agency, we are not getting those concerns. So if they're out there, I don't bite. We don't bite. We're happy to have those conversations. Just ask them to call us or email us. And we will take that work off of your hands, because you've got more stuff to work on. So I appreciate you doing that for us.
Sure. I'll actually dig through my emails and try forwarding you some of the letters that I guess your predecessors, if that's the right term, had received, because this is, I'm surprised this is new to you.
Yeah, and we have reached out to them again, but again, instead of forwarding emails that you received, I would appreciate if you would ask them to reach out to our staff directly, so we can just, instead of playing middleman here, we can just directly, please.
Sure. And some of these are letters that they've copied me on that were sent to Connect Transit. So I'm going to try and relight those fires and reconnect, because apparently, well, it needs to be done. Then just one other question, or it's more just a discussion point. So like this last mile, first mile service type change, there's been talk about like For example, whenever Rivian came in and they were talking at, I think it was a chamber event, it was some community event. They came in and they were talking about this future model for auto ownership and rideshare, that people would just be sharing ownership in vehicles, similar to like a rideshare type service. And then there's rideshare that's kind of augmenting bus routes in other towns. Could you maybe speak to if Connect Transit has had any discussion on what the future is for public transit in our community?
Yeah, sure, we have. We've talked about this internally. We've talked about this with agencies out in Washington, D.C. and in Springfield. So let me answer the very obvious question that we get all the time. Why aren't we putting that money into rideshare? Some people say that that's more efficient. The very simple thing is, if we go to rideshare, that IDOT appropriation of $9.3 million and that federal appropriation of $2.1 million is now off the table, because those agencies require that a transit agency provide those services and abide by strict guidelines of reporting and operations. I don't think a rideshare company is going to adhere to FTA guidelines on how they're going to pick someone up and where they're going to pick them up and how they're going to deliver them. And on top of it, the federal and state agencies aren't going to give us that money. So rideshare, from what we're trying to accomplish, is off the table because it takes $12 million off the table right away. The future of the system, when we talked to Bloomington, they said, what is it about autonomous and all that stuff? Obviously, we're constantly looking at that. There will probably be a day that happens across the country. Right now, the cost of that is so astronomical, it's not even something that we can even imagine to take on. And two, the technology isn't really all there completely. I mean, I know there's a few major cities that some private industries are testing that. We do have conversations with Rivian. The former general manager and the interim general manager had conversations with them. I don't believe Mr. Peterson has, just because we've kind of told him just to steady the ship. I'm sure that when we have a new general manager, the board will encourage that individual to reach out to Rivian. It's a great asset down the street from us to try to find those solutions. But that's kind of where we are about what we look at going forward in the future for Connect Transit.
Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. First of all, a thank you to our Connect Transit representatives for the town, Julie and Mandava and Timothy, for being here and hanging in here till almost 10 o'clock at night. Thank you to Mr. Peterson and Mr. Whitehouse for this really good presentation. I want to go to just briefly the IGA issue and ask if there is maybe a precedence at other transit organizations to restructure that IGA such that that requirement of bringing the budget to us for approval might be streamlined or eliminated, maybe even altogether. And the reason why I bring that up is that within our own community, we have other entities to which we provide funding, EDC, the Visitor Bureau, Convention Visitor Bureau, and they are able to operate their operations with the guidance of their boards, to which we appoint representatives. They're able to do that autonomously. Now, ultimately, if they, to make their budgets work, they come to Bloomington and Normal for funding, and so are accountable to us for that. But I've always been a little, I don't know, kind of thought it was sort of curious that despite the precedents with CVB and EDC, we had this IGA that required this, almost seemed like extra step, and it hasn't necessarily always been adhered to, and maybe because it doesn't really make sense. So either enlighten me as to why maybe it was written that way, and maybe I'm overlooking an important reason for that, or if there could be an appetite for restructuring it so that you had greater autonomy still providing updates to us like EDC does, like CVB does, because we are a funding source for you, but without kind of getting into your business about your budget. So I don't know whether Mr. Whitehouse or Mr. Peterson, either of you want to tackle that one.
Well, thanks.
I would like to jump in on that one first. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that IGA is quite long in the tooth.
Yeah.
Has not been visited. And I think that's something we should encourage the board to do, is to revisit that IGA. I'm completely in agreement with you, Ms. Lorenz, in the sense that we have very competent board members that we've appointed. We can tell by the work that they've done the last 2 or 3 years with the Connect to the Future work group and a lot of the changes that have been made. And so I'll also join you in thanking board members here tonight for your volunteer services and really caring about the transit system that we have. And I would strongly recommend at such time as some of the amendments and adjustments are made to the IGA that we would take away that clause that would have us approve the budget. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't look at the budget and we shouldn't know what's going on. I think that's vitally important that we are updated and know what that is. But the board members are the boots on the ground, if you will, and they understand the nuances and that. And so I think I'm with you on that one.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilman Lorenz. Let me try to take a approach at this, and then maybe I'll ask Mark to help me out here. So when I think you said, are there other examples that we can look at in transit for intergovernmental agreements?
Yes.
I don't know, and I'll tell you why I don't know, and I can't think of any. Bloomington Normal, Connect Transit is very unique. Most other transit authorities are taxing authorities. They're their own taxing authority. They're their own unit of local government, and they have their own autonomy. Bloomington Normal is unique that there was an intergovernmental agreement when the original system left. Both communities stepped up and came to the plate and said, we have to provide transit. So I don't know if any other system, and we can reach out to, our associations that we're part of and all that stuff, but I'm not aware of any other system that has an intergovernmental agreement like we do. As far as the intergovernmental agreement, I'll tell you what I've said from day one. Our board, and I agree with what you and what the mayor has said, our board is very capable of making the day-to-day decisions. But I've also said that intergovernmental agreement is a decision based on the elected of your council and the elected of Bloomington Council. We serve at the pleasure of both of those councils. I don't think it's appropriate for us to advocate one way or the other of how that intergovernmental agreement should look like. I think that's the elected's decision. I would just caution, that if too much authority is taken away, is there a purpose for a board at all? So I'll leave it my thoughts with that on that. Mark?
Well, I have an interesting perspective because I was involved in the drafting of that long-toothed intergovernmental agreement. I think it was about 10 years ago, maybe, because I know my counterpart in Bloomington was David Hales, and he and I, along with legal counsel, I think Steve Mart and probably Jeff Jurgens in Bloomington, with some interface with Connect staff, amended and revised that intergovernmental agreement. And it was through that process where the city managers were made ex officio non-voting members before they could be voting members. I was on the board as a voting member at one point, and that's where we also changed the mix from 3 and 3 from each city to 4 and 3. Bloomington got an extra appointee because of their contribution to the system, and there were other changes made. I think, and maybe it was poorly drafted, and I'll take some responsibility for that at the case, but the approval of the budget was really more of a function of approving the contribution from each city. Every year, the contribution typically varies depending on the operating needs of the system. And so the idea was to present the budget to each council to seek their approval So they would then approve the requested operating subsidy or the contribution, whether it's operating or capital. The whole idea is if a council chose not to approve it, they could potentially withhold funding. We don't like the budget, so we're not going to give you any money. That's really where the councils control the budget. It wasn't to go through line item by line item and you know, because you're really not equipped to do that. You don't have the background, and that's where the Connect Transit Board is dealing with these issues day in and day out. But it was more to look at a high level, to present information, certainly to answer questions, but ultimately was to endorse the requested local subsidy to the system, not to approve the whole budget. So I think either that provision is being misinterpreted or it was poorly written. But Ms. Lorenz, you're right, that really isn't an appropriate function of the councils. Now, obviously, you know, the councils appoint the representatives, so they have some control over the board through the appointment of representatives. I should say the mayors do, with advice and consent of the council, and that's another control that they have. I think the attitude with Connect Transit Board is we want to be good partners, and we want to make sure that the city councils are comfortable with what we're doing and how we're spending the money. And I think the board and along with staff would be more than happy to respond to questions or to defend the budget if necessary, because I think it is defensible. But by the same token, we'll listen, and if there's concerns from the council, you know, adjustments can be made. But I think the ultimate group to actually approve the budget is and should be and is intended to be the board for the transit system. And that's my recollection of that whole process, because I did spend quite a bit of time on it when that was redrafted. And you know, it's all maybe time to take another look at it. I'm not suggesting it's not time to take another look at the agreement, but that's my recollection of the intent.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Well, Brian, Mark, thank you. Board members, thank you for your service. You've given us a good story tonight. You've got us a very successful system, given the what you're handed to deal with. And so we as a community, thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. McCarthy.
Sorry, Mayor. I'll be brief. I promise everybody. I know it's late. I just want to draw council's attention and all the watching public, if you didn't catch the story, the good story today on Rivian and the latest funding. Splashed in the newspaper today, a significantly large new investment, over $2.5 billion to be exact, already in 2021. In the 19 days so far we've had, and an increase in jobs already. It's a bright spot in a pandemic world here, that good things are still happening here and for our community as a whole. And just really to highlight that all this private investment is coming right here in Normal, right? I mean, that's amazing. It's hard to accurately state how amazing this story is and how once in a lifetime this opportunity of attracting Rivian to Normal to invest and grow here really is. With all that, you know, I'm thankful to our partners at McLean County and the AEDC back then that got on board and joined our voices to help attract them and vet them and bring them here. And I'm grateful to you, Mayor. I know you played a very leading role, and my fellow council members that are here that help take those votes and support those incentives that ultimately landed Rivian in our backyard and then ultimately caused them to say, don't worry about the economic incentives you promised us, and gave us a pass on them ultimately, which underscores the quality organization and the community heart and value that organization has. and why they're making such big, strong investments in us, because we were willing to invest in them. So I'm grateful. It's fabulous, bright news for our community. And thanks again to everybody who supported them.
We have a motion from Ms. Smith. Did we have a second?
Yes, second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.